We are the modern day equivalent of like three old guys sitting around sitting in front of the Alberta wheat pool grain elevator, bitching and complaining, solving the world's problems. That's what we are.
Wasn't it
The high tech.
Who said it? Was it you, Steve, that said that Brendan described it? You guys don't sound any worse than any other three old guys sitting around talking about shit.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, three guys talking. You were pretty good for three guys talking. You just like damn
So,
fade praise.
You been farming long or what? All righty, what are we talking about here, boys?
Looks like snow.
What were we talking about?
Well, I know you wanted to do Israel Revisited. Why? What's happened? What's going on?
Well, I think it's been an interesting take after the fact, because we knew it would be.
I mean,
we thought we'd circle back and dare to compare, see where things have gone, because a lot of it was. I know that we were talking about, okay, what is Israel going to use as tactics going in there?
Okay.
That was our main question. Like, what is their end game? What is their objective? How are they going to achieve it? Because to us, it was kind of like, that was kind of the nebulous thing. We couldn't figure that out. I can't remember if we mentioned it at the time, but what's played into it since. On opposite sides of the spectrum, it's world opinion towards how they've gone about it, on the one hand, and then completely external to Israel, all the hoo-ha that's been going on everywhere else in the world regarding this.
That to me is the bigger story.
And the approach. I even got into it with my mother last weekend. You
watch your mouth, boy.
Well, because she has always, understandably, I believe, been upset with.
Hated them rotten kites.
No, well, I did close out the conversation with calling her a Nazi sympathizer, but just to poke at her, straight,
just to poke the bear,
right? But I love my mom, and I know where she's come from, so she's been understandably upset, and I actually critique Israel for the same reasons, the expansionism into the settlements into the West Bank and all that, right? Yeah. But no one should be using that right now to cloud what happened on October 7th.
Yeah.
Right? In any way, shape, or form, and
the two are not connected.
Someone shared a Bill Maher recently, which kind of had him talking about that. And it's just
what was he saying?
Well, people need to be careful who they're hitching their wagon to and why.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? They gotta know what they're doing. If you want to talk Palestine, that's fine. Yeah. If you're going to talk Hamas and you've got silhouettes of hang gliders on your T-shirt.
Exactly. That's what you're standing for. That's the exact same thing as, Hitler had some good ideas. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah. There's a great the great podcaster Daryl Cooper. He had an episode called "The Madam Butterfly Effect," and it was an episode specifically about like how the Japanese Red Army introduced suicide tactics to the PFLP and how that infected the rest of the modern Muslim terror.
Okay,
right, and it introduced the suicide bombers and stuff like that. But as part of it, he talks about how it was also like the multinational terrorism. So then, like the Red Army faction, the Baader Meinhof gang, were starting to do things for the PFLP, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of Carlos pulling it all together.
And so then but he was like, so we got to the point where Germans were killing Jews to prevent fascism.
Yeah, let that one percolate for a little while.
Well, alongside the Japanese.
Alongside the Japanese, yeah. Like Germans and Japanese were killing Jews to prevent fascism.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm not super surprised in how it played out, in that Hamas has no heavy weapons. They have no real training in urban warfare. They are, at best, an irregular militia. Mm-hmm. They're probably 99% of what they do is internal security within Gaza. And basically suppressing elements of Fatah and other rival elements, rival factions within Gaza. So they probably, I'm going to equate them to a street gang. And that a street gang has to protect its own turf and has to control its own space and its own enterprises. So yeah, they use violence, but I'm going to say probably to the same, I would just say, technical proficiency of doing that. So it's a suicide mission every time they come within 400 meters of the IDF. They're just going to get absolutely smoked with very little. Again, the IDF can just stand off and engage with their 30 caliber weapons from 700 meters out. And for the most part, Hamas has no response. They have, for the most part, AKs, RPGs.
Well, with to my mind, the obvious exclusion of October 6th, because half the Israeli casualties were IDF.
Yes, but they weren't. It was a surprise attack.
Yeah, it was a surprise attack. Yeah,
this is not a surprise attack. When a mechanized infantry company comes rolling up on a neighborhood in Gaza, there's no surprise. You're not taking the Israelis by surprise on that one.
Oh, no question.
Right? So,
I mean, the way they can it's the hit and run tactics that come with having this underground network of tunnels and bunkers.
Yeah.
But those, I would argue, that's not for domestic consumption. That's not
that was to infiltrate into Israel. Not so much for, again, and that's kind of the problem. They're not like Viet Cong spider holes, which completely honeycomb through a defensive position or a given territory.
Right.
My understanding of these tunnels is that they are all meant to get into Israel.
So they're not necessarily. It's not necessarily an interconnected network of tunnels along a front.
Yeah.
And covering the whole of Gaza. It's specific little networks of tunnels at this spot.
That kind of run parallel north-south, or like over the border. That's my understanding of them. So they're not really useful for defending Gaza. They're useful for attacking Israel, but they're not useful for defending Gaza from Israeli attack.
It occurs to me as we discuss this, it's almost like the analogy I would use is Mogadishu. And the Black Hawk Down event.
Yeah.
Which saw, I mean, the casualty rates on the two respective sides were completely off base. Because as you said, these are untrained militias, essentially criminal thugs.
Yeah.
Right. I'd say the obvious exception here is the civilian death toll that went with it.
Right. Now, I did see an interesting piece by, I believe his name is Nick Freitas, who he felt that the Hamas was pursuing a form of asymmetric warfare using their own civilian casualties, in that they cannot win a stand-up fight, so they have to use asymmetric means. Now, usually we come to equate that with guerrilla warfare, hit and run. But in his view, or his thesis, was that requires a large amount of real estate. You need a significant amount of ground to maneuver in, to hide in, to disperse. And then, of course, Gaza being such a small, narrowly confined area, that's not an option. So Hamas's asymmetric method was to induce as many civilian casualties as they could, and therefore drive a wedge between American public opinion and Israel. Global public opinion, yes, but what the Norwegians think of Israel is completely irrelevant. What the Italians think of Israel is completely irrelevant.
What Peru thinks of.
Right. Yeah. What America thinks of Israel is central. So the whole idea is to alienate Israel from American public opinion. And that by maximizing as many of their own civilian casualties as they possibly can, Hamas figures that they can maybe achieve this.
Yeah, I mean, sitting here in North America, in the society we've grown up in, it is hard to understand that kind of thinking, But I mean, I think we saw that to a certain extent in the former Yugoslavia. There were examples of that of one side or another shelling their own people and making it look like the other side did it. I think there's more than one example of that.
Perhaps I don't recall, but
not to
that
this
war was
extent.
ugly enough that
war was ugly enough.
that it might happen.
Yeah, but what you're describing is more like false flags, and these aren't. Hamas,
Yeah.
Hamas isn't looking for false flags. It's like
They're just looking for
they're
carnage.
like the Israeli killed this baby. Well, the Israelis probably did really kill that baby, but
Hamas
is responsible for forcing that family to stay there.
Yeah,
And
Hamas. Forced that family to stand inside their munitions dump. Yeah, and then when
they popped up and shot at the Israelis. And
exactly.
Just
buggered off because left the family.
Hamas wanted the bodies.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like that family was useless to them alive. They're much more valuable to them dead.
Yes.
Which is a horrific thing to consider, but I mean,
not surprising given what Hamas has done in the past.
It's it's terrorist arithmetic.
And given what Hamas has done to the population of Gaza over the last 10 years in just keeping internal political control.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's what was it? Terrorist propaganda, terrorist statistics? Is that what you said? Terrorist numbers,
terrorist arithmetic.
Terrorist arithmetic. I think it's almost like Stalinist arithmetic. Like 3 people is a tragedy.
A million people's
three people is a statistic. A million people is a tragedy.
Or no,
it's the other way around.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're
saying that once
individuals a tragedy. And then
a few people that people can get to know by name and identify with, they get very upset.
Yeah.
But when you get into hundreds of thousands of deaths,
or wipe out a population,
it just becomes too much, and it becomes a meaningless number. Yeah,
you're right. Sorry, I got that.
So if you're going to kill hundreds of thousands. Don't kill 25. Kill hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and I think this is where
that's a T-shirt I always wanted to do. Is a picture of Stalin with no lives matter.
Yeah, no lives matter. Yeah, yeah, no lives matter.
Yeah, I think that where the conversation right now is kind of bogging down, or can get on either side, is the whole concept of asymmetric warfare. I mean, it's always been there. These are the little guys. These are the guys with no resources, no power, no nothing.
These are the guys using the tools that are available to them.
Exactly. So that's the argument.
Yeah.
Right. But now we have to measure that against, what did they use those tools to do? And we're talking about particularly the civilian casualties inflicted on October 6th. And in what name?
And their own civilian casualties since then.
Yeah, exactly. And so now they're pointing to the Israelis.
Yeah.
So now the Israelis are responding. I believe that it is an over-the-top response, but it's not all that surprising. I'm not saying it's justified. I'm saying it's not that surprising given the emotional toll. We're talking about the equivalent of 20. I think we did the math. 20 9/11s. Based on population.
Yeah.
Do you think Hamas has achieved their objectives? Because now I understand there's a ceasefire. I've heard something about this. There was some kind of deal, some kind of ceasefire.
I'm not sure what happened with that because I saw a headline. I didn't read the story. I saw a headline this morning saying that they welched on it. They didn't turn up with the hostages. So.
Oh, they didn't? Okay.
Oh, really?
Like I know that some were.
And it was only 24 of them or something.
Yeah.
No, some hostages came out.
Yeah,
I know that.
Some came out, 24, 50,
although
something like that.
I don't know if that was the truce-related hostages. I mean, that was a group that got released.
Yeah.
I just. This is what clouds.
What do you think? What do you think? I mean, we know what Freitas thinks. What do you think? What do you think Hamas's goals are?
Well, it's really hard to say. Are they just puppets whose strings are being pulled elsewhere? I think there's a certain element of that. Although, what are their aims? I think they have successfully disrupted what had been the impending
Saudi-Israeli.
Saudi-Israeli dance that was going on, right? So they've
rapprochement anyway,
right, because now all of the the rank and file population of all the Arab nations are up in arms.
Yes.
So now the governments, no matter what they prefer to do on behalf of those people, however they perceive that, now their hands are kind of tied. And you're right, and it's.
Do you think that they might still make those rapprochements under the table?
Oh, undoubtedly.
So is it really going to help Hamas in any way?
What?
Like we know that like Iran has the most to gain from this.
Yeah.
Do you really think that Israel and Saudi Arabia aren't still very aware that the biggest threat to both of them is Iran, and that they should cooperate with it for their
Absolutely.
mutual benefit,
But now
even if they just keep it in the low ground?
Now they can't do it overtly.
I guess. I suppose there's a benefit to overt
that
cooperation.
security relationship can exist in the shadows.
I guess, yeah.
It's
Fair
what
enough.
comes from being out in the light. That's a game changer, right? It's
Fair
like
enough.
when Sadat and Begin hugged each other.
Yes.
Right.
That's true. Look at what a benefit that has been to Israel and
Yeah,
Egypt.
it helped set
Yeah.
a different bar.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't as great as what the
What
Good
was
Friday
Sadat's
Accords
first name?
achieved. Saddam. No, whose?
Anwar Sadat. Yeah. that
Anwar
was it.
Sadat.
Yeah. And like when he addressed the Knesset and
Yeah.
It
there was
worked out so well for him in the end, though.
No, it did not. But it did definitely go well for Egypt.
Yeah, they worked better for Egypt for sure.
Definitely worked better for Egypt.
I don't know. Insofar as your question, has Hamas achieved what it meant to? I think we're still trying to figure out
Maybe
What-
if
what
the
that was?
only goal,
I'm still trying to. I still don't understand what Hamas's objectives were. In
if the only goal was to stop Israeli-Saudi cooperation, then yeah, I guess they've achieved that.
No, I think that's just one element of the bigger picture that you already painted, which is global world opinion,
Or American opinion.
and specifically in the U.S. And in the quote unquote Western world that matters, and that's depending
America.
on how you look at
That's
it.
it.
Well,
That is it. Israel, like I will tell you this from firsthand experience, Israelis do not give a rat's ass what anyone outside of America thinks.
no, that's
They notice, like for example, several said to me they were sad to see that Stephen Harper lost the election because they felt that Harper was a friend of Israel.
well, okay. So
They didn't know anything else about domestic Canadian politics. They just said that, hopefully we will have that same relationship with the next prime minister. But they were very aware that Harper was a supporter of Israel. So they're concerned in that way. But at the same time, they knew that if Canada got a rabidly anti-Israel parliament,
yeah.
it would have no effect on them.
No, true. Interestingly enough, that same video that began with the Bill Mayer, it
Yeah.
segged into Stephen Harper.
He actually
Segment.
mentioned Stephen Harper.
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay.
It went from Bill Mayer talking on his
Oh,
show
the algorithm
to,
bumped you to a Stephen Harper.
well, in the same video, someone had created this. It started with Bill Mayer, and it went to Stephen Harper
sorry,
talking about
gotcha,
how when he was
gotcha.
prime minister, so it must have been made
Gotcha,
recently,
Yep.
how when he was
Yep.
prime minister, he was asked consistently by the media,
Mm-hmm.
how could we be friends with Israel? And his response was, and he's sitting here explaining with, a polite, genuine,
Mm-hmm.
sincere, only slightly patronizing smile on his face, the obvious reasons we should support and be friends with Israel. That they're a democracy, the free press, and the judiciary and stuff like that. But again, it's always been my feeling that, you can support the state of Israel and admire it for what's admirable, but there are things that they have done and still do that are not so admirable. And that's, welcome to the human race, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way things are. So I don't buy into I stand by Israel no matter what. I support Israel
Yeah.
generally across the board.
Or you support Israel's right to exist, perhaps?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about that last time we discussed
Yeah.
it. It's like discussing Zionism and anti-Zionism is a nothing burger. Israel fucking exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrap your heads around that. It's
Yeah.
been 75 years.
Also, like I share your yeah, Israel does a lot of stuff that is distinctly uncomfortable
Yeah.
for a democracy. But again, after I went there, my views changed in that say, okay, what's their alternative? What's the option?
Well, it
Like,
depends.
it's one thing to say, like, Israel, you shouldn't be doing that. And say, okay, what should we do instead? That's a very difficult question to answer.
It depends on what particular issue you're looking at. On the one hand, I think what makes some people uncomfortable is there's how do we deal with the Palestinians and the Arabs amongst us? The Palestinians who work across the border, and the Arab Israelis who live amongst us, right? So that's
not really an issue, though.
Well,
Not
depending
really.
on how you look at it.
Area C is the issue.
One, I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
Like Area C is the area in the West Bank
Yeah.
that is large amounts of the West Bank,
Yeah.
particularly around Jerusalem and closer to the Jordan River Valley, are set aside for Israeli settlements.
Right. So that becomes the second point that I
Right.
feel is the most contentious. Right. And there are certain terms I hesitate to use because they can be inflammatory specifically in this context.
Yeah.
And one of them is Lebensraum. Right? Because I feel in some ways that's what's playing out here. Right? It's like where the Israeli population going to expand to as the population growth occurs through birth,
And immigration.
but also immigration, because
Yeah.
they are the home of like anyone who is of the Jewish faith
Yep.
or race as they equate it
Yeah.
themselves has a birthright to be a citizen of Israel.
Yeah.
So that's still occurring as far as I know, right? So,
Area C they're not even contiguously linked. They're small, not small. They're large kidney bean shaped pockets, which are all little islands separated from one another, which are under the authority or which are under the administrative control of the Palestinian Authority, which in the West Bank is Fatah. And these areas they're very reminiscent of South African homelands.
I was going to say, I
in
mean,
the apartheid era.
The analogies with apartheid era, South Africa and Rhodesia before it was Zimbabwe, and the white settlers, the white farmers, who were, I shouldn't use settlers. That's again, that's a contentious term. It might apply, but it could lead to
Settlements, yeah. We talk about Israeli settlements on the West Bank.
But now you're just one step away from colonizers, right? And it may or may not apply, but I don't want to get into that particular discourse at this moment, right? But those same things. I remember back in the day, being fascinated as a youth, the footage and, the Time magazine articles with the photos you would see coming out of Rhodesia and South Africa of armed farmers.
Yeah.
Right? And I believe that to a certain extent is analogous to what's happening in the West Bank. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, but I won't swear to it, that some of what's happening there, if it isn't against international law per se, it flies in the face of the agreements that have been made.
Right.
And the fact that most of these settlements are, or have been some very orthodox or ultra-Orthodox members of the Jewish faith.
I don't know about that, to be honest. I don't know. I didn't see anything.
I believe is at least playing out in certain tensions. Certainly, there were, in the immediate aftermath of October 6th, there were reports of settlers inflicting some atrocities on Palestinian civilians in the area.
Now, what do you think? I mean, well, obviously, we all know here what prevents a single state solution of Jews and Muslims living together in the same multi-ethnic, multi-religious entity is not that Jews are going to run around killing Muslims. It's that Muslims are going to run around killing Jews. I mean, this does not need to be said.
There's also the Israelis are worried about demographics, right? Their only population growth is coming in the Orthodox communities and in
possibly
and in immigration.
Possibly, but for the Palestinians, I mean, any decent demographer is going to tell you, though, that if you incorporate the Palestinian population and they achieve prosperity and become westernized, which prosperity has a nasty habit of doing, their birth rates are going to equal out with the Israelis.
I agree with you.
Right?
But
so,
I don't know that Israelis see it that way.
Maybe.
But
Israelis, again, that's the secondary problem.
And again, I heard somebody say that that Israelis probably won't allow a single state solution like that and remain a democracy, because in their event, the demographics mean they can be a Jewish state or they can be a democratic state, but they can't be both.
Maybe. But again, that's the secondary problem.
Well, they're already a Jewish state and a democratic state.
Yeah, but
if you integrate the populations of the West Bank and Gaza, then that's you got to remember, like
it would change the electoral balance.
You're talking
into a one
single
state.
state.
We're talking one state here. So.
Yeah.
But again, this is all good and theoretical.
Yeah.
Everybody who knows anything about the situation knows that the number one problem is that the Palestinians keep trying to kill people.
Yeah.
Well, so
before we ever worry about demographics, we have to worry about the streets running red with blood because of the homicidal mania of the Palestinian leadership.
So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But
this is pretty obvious.
The simple statement there is, your first obstacle to a single state, or frankly, a two-state solution. Either way, is the history, and depending on how you look at it, it goes back.
I wouldn't say the history; I'd say it's the present.
But it's
the refusal of the Palestinians, to allow Israel to exist.
But it's the ongoing. So what plays into this? There's two things that play into this. The more immediate one is this, but it goes back, is the cycle of revanchism, right, on both sides, right? But certainly the angst of of those who have the grievances is on the Palestinian side, and it has been for 75 years. And there are certainly reasons behind that.
I wouldn't say that. I don't feel the Israelis feel that way.
No, of course. Some Israelis do.
There are non-stop terrorist attacks that happen in Israel.
Yeah.
That murder 3 or 4 Israelis here or there.
Yeah.
That we don't hear about anymore.
Oh, yeah.
They happen so often. They just don't make our news cycle anymore.
Right.
Yeah, like weekends in Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. There is not a family in Israel that has not been touched by some act of Palestinian terrorism, that has not had someone maimed or murdered over the past, within from grandparents to grandchildren.
Yeah.
That has not had at least 2 people maimed or murdered by an act of Palestinian aggression. So they feel like, for us to say on the outside, the grievances are all on the side of the Palestinians.
No,
they're not. They're not.
No.
The Israelis feel just as aggrieved and just as beset upon as the Palestinians do.
Let me clarify. When I'm talking about the aggrieved, I'm talking about the disenfranchised, the disempowered. And it's a relative scale.
Okay, fair
right,
enough.
But this goes
fair
back
enough.
to 48 and actually prior to that.
Yeah.
When the kibbutzniks started showing up and
mass immigration of Jews into the Palestinian mandate.
And as we've discussed in our last episode on this subject, that there were things done by Jewish settlers at the time. And the Haganah.
Yep. Irgun.
The Irgun. That were war crimes.
Legit.
Right? And by the end of it, the Palestinians were without a land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, they had...
Yeah, but that wasn't the fault of the Israelis.
No.
They were... Their territories that remained to them were then occupied by the Syrians, the Jordanians, and the Egyptians.
Right.
So that's not Israel's fault.
No, but
not entirely. You know what I mean? Like, partially, yes. Yes.
The Arab population of what was Palestine at the time under the Ottomans and then the British Mandate, right? All of a sudden, there's this influx of this other people, different faith.
Yep. Different
taking
language,
over,
different culture.
And then they're given some of this land, right? And they're kind of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then the war occurs and shitty things are done to them as well.
Oh, yeah, because it's a war.
And they're on the losing side.
Yep.
Right?
And then their allies turn on them.
Yeah. And say, and this is all you got, right? So, and then those same allies deliberately keep them in refugee camps.
Yeah, and use them as political pawns.
Right? In the same way that they've been used up to this time. That's what I'm talking about, the grievances, right?
Sure.
Because they can look across that land and say, that's the land of my grandfather or my great-grandfather, and now some dickhead is building a house on it, right? And so that's one of the issues that's going on, right? And so you got those grievances back and forth. The other, and I was really interested to see this the other day, was Christopher Hitchens, the historian. And they were showing an interview with him, and he was talking about his views, his historical views of Islam. And how little sympathy he had for, listen, we do not have to tolerate. And this is, I think, and what he was espousing there was like, this is, one of the few instances of not tolerating intolerance. And he was pointing out the very strong, and let's face it, very overriding elements of the Islamic faith that espouse, certain views, not just towards the Jewish faith, but to all all
other
infidels,
faith.
and what should be done about them.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was, okay, there's someone who's got a lot of courage to step up, not just in the face of that, but also, in days of woke, if you say something like that, you're going to be, now you're a racist.
Although Christopher Hitchens is already on the enemy list of a lot of woke folks, so he has nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I guess. But
it would be very
again,
different if someone like, say, Bill Maher were to say that. Who is not, he hasn't completely alienated himself from progressive society. He's teetering on the fence. And if you were to say something like that, then he would definitely face consequences, no doubt about it.
Well, I think he does walk that fine line.
A Hollywood actor were to say that, oh boy, that to me would be some kind of courage.
Yeah,
like for someone like, say, Douglas Murray or Christopher Hitchens or Jordan Peterson to say something like that. Well, what? The people who already hate them are going to hate them again? Yeah, big deal. Whatever.
Well, Hitchens to me, it comes in drips and drabs. My first exposure to Hitchens was he wrote a book on the history of Cyprus. But it was from a social and cultural perspective, not from a political one.
Am I confusing Hitchens with somebody else, maybe? Hitchens is a very well-known atheist, isn't he?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah, he is.
Okay, maybe I'm confusing him with somebody else.
No, I think you might have him right, because I think you're probably right. It's just my exposure to him hasn't been enough. But I've come to realize, even as we've been discussing him here, that I do equate him with the Peterson. I'm not necessarily going to...
I'm going to see if I can't... I'm just going to pull up my tablet here while you're talking to see if I can't put a face to the name.
He's actually he looks very much like a middle upper class Englishman.
Because that's what he is.
Just to see him, yeah.
But
I believe his rational approach to things is exactly what I think is necessary.
There's
I don't
a
agree
fellow who is who used to be a leftist and who now completely repudiates leftism. And that's what I said. Like he's kind of like a...
And you haven't memorized his name? Got his picture on your wall?
No. I've only seen a couple of his
I thought
things.
you'd have the poster.
He's supposedly a very good debater. I don't know. I just haven't come across a lot of his stuff.
It's not Stephen Fry, is it?
No. And I'm wondering if I'm confusing that guy with Christopher Hitchens. Anyway, you keep talking, buddy. I'm punching.
Actually,
here.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other element of things, and we've talked about this as well in a number of contexts. That if there's economic prosperity,
I think this might be the guy.
If there's economic prosperity across the board for Palestinians and Israelis, that's the solution, as we've seen in the Good Friday Accords and in Ireland, right? But I think two things are at play there. First of all, Ireland and Ulster are in the first world, so they've got a better starting point. And I'm going to use the word "only" in this next sentence. Their history only goes back to the time of Henry VIII and the Anglican Church and the vitriol that came with
It
that. The
says
anti-Catholicism.
here Hitchens died.
Yeah,
in
2011.
2011.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not. He's not the guy I'm thinking of. The guy I'm thinking of is alive.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, it's all good. I'm just saying, this is what prevents the two-state, or frankly, even the single-state and even a two-state solution. It's the hatred that goes back generations with one losing side that's perpetually powerless, and at the same time is living in third world conditions, right? So that even if you did start to give them better economic prosperity, it's going to take that much longer to get there. At the same time that they're having that much more cultural animosity to overcome. Right.
Well, again, do you think, and like this is my point in this, is that if Israel had the honest and sincere belief that a Palestinian state would not wage some kind of violence against them, they'd do it. They'd do it. They're tired of the occupation, of the costs involved in it, the extreme costs involved in running a perpetual security state. If they could live in peace with the Palestinians the way they do with the Egyptians, they'd do it in a heartbeat.
Or the Jordanians.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well,
the obstacle to this is the Palestinian people themselves. And I don't mean the Palestinian leadership. I mean the Palestinian people. Because they themselves are caught up in this belief that all of their problems in life are due to the existence of Israel.
Right. So, I mean, again, the simple solution to that is start taking away the problems in their lives, right? Now we're talking essential basic economics and socioeconomics, right? Once their standard of living gets better, then they get less and less to complain about over time, right? I mean, their leadership is involved, particularly if you look at Hamas. I mean, that's the obvious one, right? They've precluded any political discourse, and it's all about their vision. So once the Palestinian people were stuck with them, they were stuck with them in Gaza. Fatah, interestingly, so now it's again, I've got nothing but anecdotal and popular media references to go with, but my impression is Fatah and the West Bank actually, I don't want to use the word collaborate, but I will. They in terms of the actual use of the word, the non-pejorative use of the word, which is they interact with the Israeli authorities and administration fairly effectively at a functional level. So I see peace being not just possible, but actually maintained there to a certain extent, because of the differences between Fatah in their vision and Hamas in their vision. Fatah is more about how do we define Palestine and develop Palestine and have a Palestine. Hamas is as much about
I don't know
how
if
do
I
we
would
destroy
go that
Israel.
far. I don't know if I would describe Fatah
relative
in
to
those terms.
relative to Hamas. I'm saying
Even relative to Hamas.
Well, Hamas is all about let's destroy Israel.
Yes, Fatah
And
is
Jews.
more about how do we line our own pockets. And like Fatah is as corrupt. Yeah, again, I think Fatah's main goal, based on their record, is they're more than happy to tolerate the existence of Israel, so long as the leadership of Fatah is able to retain that high standard of living. Like they want to exacerbate and perpetuate the struggle and the grievance between Palestinians and Israel, because it brings that foreign aid flowing in. But they are as corrupt an entity as you can possibly imagine. Like, they're just as corrupt as Hamas. But Hamas, at least, like, has that homicidal urge. I don't think Fatah has that. I think that's been usurped by greed and avarice. But they are happy to tolerate the existence of Israel because it's what keeps the checks flowing in.
That's an interesting comparison, because I was going to say, it sort of resonates with what you threw out in text and email exchange in the last couple of days about evil being the lesser sin compared to ignorance, right? So in my mind, I'm kind of like, okay, well, if corruption is the sin of Fatah, is that better or worse than the ideological
Yes.
homicidal approach of Hamas,
Yeah.
right? So now you're weighing those two very
because
different
you can
things.
at least work. Like, we now have a way that we can deal with Fatah.
Yeah.
Like, we can buy peace.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't work with a guy like Hamas. You can't. There's nothing like for Israel. There's nothing you can do outside of finger on a trigger.
The interesting commentary on both those concepts, because now we're weighing those.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of, okay, which is better, which is worse? And you've pointed out, I think rightly, that, okay, it's better to work with Fatah.
Yeah.
Right.
And sucks for the Palestinians either way.
Well, at least
Like, this is not like I want to make clear, I am not saying this from the Palestinian perspective.
No.
I'm saying this from the Israeli perspective.
We're talking at this point. We're talking about peace. Well, and to me, there's a certain, again, it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a high bar to meet, but the one is just in terms of altruistic measurement. You take the one over the other, right? I think we've correctly identified the one. What also
that was in the very beginning of the conflict, though. I don't think that's going on now.
Even as we have that conversation, I was realizing even the Hamas leadership out of Gaza are all living in the
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure,
and they're rich as well.
Yeah,
right. So it's
like
corruption in a different form.
Both are horribly corrupt.
Yeah.
Horribly and totally corrupt.
Which makes, in my mind, that makes Hamas even worse.
But Hamas takes all of that money that comes in, and it goes 20% into weapons of war and 80% into graft.
Yeah.
Whereas Fatah takes all of that money coming in, and 98% goes into graft. 2% goes into weapons of war.
Does it go into weapons of war, or surely some of it goes into the local economy? More than in Gaza.
Only through, well, no. I mean, yeah, some goes into the economy, because when the warlord there wants to build a mansion, well, somebody's going to get employed building it, right? And he's buying food for his vast kitchen somewhere. He's employing people in his, like, he's employing drivers, he's employing flunkies, he's employing fixers, he's employing security, he's employing cooks, he's employing servants and cleaners and this sort of thing. So yeah, it does get into the economy that way. But, and like, yes, sure, they operate hospitals, they operate schools, they operate a fire department, but minimally, just enough to keep, not because they have any great love for the Palestinian people, but because they know that if a great sickness comes and wipes out the population, they're not going to have any servants. You know what I mean? Like, they only do so far as it benefits themselves. This is the nature of the robber baron, of the exploitative, parasitic ruling class. Well, that's what they are. And like that 2%, the weapons of war, it's not really intended to overthrow Israel. It's internal security. It's to suppress any political alternative to Fatah in the West Bank. In the same way that, like I said earlier, the vast majority of Hamas's military activity is suppressing any attempts by Fatah to infiltrate Gaza. And likewise, Fatah's main concern is stopping Hamas's influence in the West Bank.
Oh, your whole JPF, PFJ thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Pythons were well ahead of the game.
So there's
I think
what prevents a two-state solution or a one-state solution is just that Israel has there's zero incentive for Israel. Like all you're doing is just saying, hey, let's just find a way to kill more Israelis when you do that. And so long as that situation remains, the status quo is going to hold.
Well, I agree with you that there has that we're talking about Charlie Brown with the football here, right? You're not going to kick that ball if Lucy keeps pulling it away. If it's all right to be able to want to kick that football, but if you don't think you're ever going to be able to actually connect your toe to it,
there's no point.
Yeah,
and like we covered last time we did this. I mean, there's absolutely nothing stopping Hamas from turning Gaza into, say, a Singapore on the Mediterranean.
Or at least
absolutely nothing.
Beirut used to be the Paris of the Middle East.
Yeah, there's absolutely they could monetize their location and climate. They could absolutely do that. They could use the funding that is pouring into Gaza to build one of the greatest, most prestigious technical universities in the world, and create. There is a very growing and very dynamic industry in global industry in business services, and that maybe the Palestinians won't build you electron microscopes, but they'll design electron microscopes for you, and they'll sell you that design. You've already got the factory. You can already build it. But the Palestinians could design that electron microscope for you.
I think we've...
And sell you that, right? There's absolutely no reason why they couldn't pursue that, but they choose not to.
Well, I mean, we've discussed there are infinite options for them investing that in their economy.
Yeah.
And being able to leverage it.
Yeah.
Right, from tourism to
capitalizing on education.
Yeah.
Taking what we consider, say, the Japanese route.
Yeah.
How do you get prosperity in a place with virtually no natural resources?
Yeah.
Well, you do what the Japanese did. Or like, say, Singapore, expertise.
Yeah.
You invest in your human capital. Now, if they were to do that, there would instantaneously be there would be no movement controls. Like if they became a completely peaceful, and I mean, first of all, they don't need a military.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to invade them? Egypt has no interest in it. Israel's not going to invade them. All they would need is a very minor criminal police that simply handle domestic, police matters.
Yeah, but this...
think of what an advantage that is for an economy that has no requirement to devote, say, between 2 and 5% of its GDP to a military.
Right.
What a huge advantage that is.
Oh, yeah, and considering all the billions of dollars they get.
Yeah.
What they could have done with that within a year, let alone 10 or 20 years ago when it first started, right?
Like it was pointed out in the last episode, the immiseration of Gaza is 100% on the hands of Hamas.
Well, I think when we're talking about the corruption and I mean, we've seen that anywhere where there's extreme poverty, anyone who manages to raise themselves out of that and get that kind of control. That is a relative scale that we simply do not understand over here.
Well,
right? So
I would
think
say to you that poverty does not cause corruption. Corruption causes poverty.
Well, I'd say it's a vicious cycle. I think and we've seen it all over the world, right?
That no country can achieve prosperity so long as they are corrupt. So long as corruption is culturally accepted, is just passively kind of shrug of the shoulders saying, that's the way of things.
Well, I think
that country is poor.
I think that's what you're talking about because because A, it's the way we've always done things, right? Because B, it's people fighting over scraps, and there's what it started out as. There's a limited number of scraps. I'm going to be the one who's So now the system is based on I'm going to be the one who controls the scraps, and so that makes me the most powerful.
I had
then
a conversation with an immigrant who said that. Corruption is good because corruption allows you to get things done. Like if you need, we got to build a road.
Yeah.
And we don't have time. We need this road now. We don't have time to go through the regular way of doing things. Look, you set out some bribes, we get this sucker built.
Is it done right?
Well, and I pointed out that no one's going to do that, because how do you get any kind of cost certainty in a corrupt environment? How do I know how much this is ever going to cost me? How do I stop this from becoming a black hole of money building this road or this bridge or what have you?
And how do you know it's going to be safe?
How do I know it's going to be built properly? I have absolutely no reassurance as the investor in doing this. So there's absolutely, in a corrupt environment, there's absolutely zero incentive for anyone to build said road or bridge or whatever it is we're trying to build.
No one to pay for it to be built.
Yeah, like say whoever has the ability to pay for it or whoever has the ability to get it done has no desire to, because again, like there's no way to be sure that the road is ever going to be built in the first place.
Yeah.
And you have no idea how much it's ever going to cost. If you don't know whether or not the game is worth a candle, you're not going to start. And he admitted that, I guess, like I never thought of it that way.
That's
He
an
never
interesting
really
metaphor.
He never really thought of it as from that perspective. Like, am I the guy who's looking to get this road built? He had always looked at it from the perspective of the guy maybe building the road.
Yeah.
I'm like the guy who's hauling gravel to it, or the guy who's driving a bulldozer for it,
Or
something like that.
Or you're a constituent of the area that needs the fucking road in the first place, right? And so that's what you're seeing. Hey, buddy's getting the road built. Hooray.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you need
whatever it takes.
If you got to bribe this guy or bribe that guy, fine, get it done.
Yeah.
Without realizing that, without thinking that, okay, if I'm the guy with only $10 million to get this thing done, now I can choose where I put my $10 million.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to revert to, I think we're talking about chicken and egg, corruption versus poverty versus corruption. I think in poor nations, that's what's happened. That's what we saw, again, using Mogadishu, Somalia back in the early 90s. That's, extreme poverty, you get hold of the resources, you get the power. On top of that, if you go, okay, here's all of a sudden, here's a whole bunch of money or a whole bunch of rice that people need to eat, and you control that, you're like, woo, it gives me even more power, right? So, I mean, and that becomes systemic. That becomes cultural. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then...
long as... And I think that this begins at the very individual level. For example, within the nuclear family. A kid does something... steals something... has some sort of, I don't know, maybe a school crossing, I don't know, whatever. And so they participate in a culture of corruption. What is the reaction of his mother?
Yeah.
Does his mother say, well, okay, I mean, you did what you had to do, or, good, you brought home some extra money for the family, good. Or does she chastise him and say, that was wrong? I didn't raise you to be that way. And that if, say, out of a family of, say, 6 children, one becomes a corrupt official, does the rest of the family keep in contact with that individual? Do they go to him? Do they look to that individual for guidance and leadership and sustenance? Or do they say that, we're poor and you're rich, but we don't want to associate with you because of the way you became rich? You're not a member of our family. Don't talk to us.
Well, I think there's a lot that's feeding into that scenario at all levels is, what's the rest of society looking like?
Right.
Do you eventually get to the point...
That's what I mean. Does the society tolerate corruption or not?
Are you the good person in the poor family who's being good, resisting temptation, and eventually you just go, fuck it, because you just see that, you see where the power lays, you see how the authorities...
Sure. And you decide to abandon your moral code.
Right. So...
Now, but do the people around you allow you to abandon your moral code? That is the real deterrence. Do you... What really... Like, for example, we often talk in moral questions. Would you do this if nobody ever knew you did it? See, that's the key question.
No, that's the definition of integrity.
Right. If you knew that, I could take bribes and I would become wealthier, let's say, fuck it. I'm never going to get ahead in this society. I got to look after myself. But could I ever look my wife and family in the eye after I did this? If the answer to that is yes, then you're probably going to do it. If the answer to that is no, if your society has a moral foundation that says, no, that's wrong, you're probably not going to do it. And I'm saying that those societies who had that moral code, they're not poor. And that's why they're not poor.
Well, again, chicken and egg, right? So
No,
I'm going to argue
no,
that those cultures...
Moral code is the chicken. It starts there. It's not well, there's no beginning, there's no end. No. There's a beginning. There is a beginning. Once a society, and this can change, a society that used to not tolerate corruption now can. And Quebec, I'm looking at you. Quebec has corruption is endemic in the province of Quebec. It wasn't like that in 1890. It is now. So I'm not saying that this is, once it's set in stone, it's done and it's the end of history. No. But I am saying that once a society tolerates corruption, it becomes poor. Once a poor society rejects corruption, it climbs out of poverty.
No, possibly. I mean, I think maybe we're talking apples and apples. The reason I was going there is because, I see that, in a lot of the poorer countries in the world, right? It's just typically that's the way it seems to end up.
Poverty
right?
and corruption, you will not find one without the other.
Right. And then the other thing is, on top of that, in Gaza, for instance, now you've got the political and religious element and the history to go with it. So, there's three factors making it even worse, right? So even if I want to take that money and invest it, now I'm still blinded. I got my blinders on. I got my tunnel vision that's based on those factors, right? I actually want to circle back to something Steve said earlier, because Steve actually spoke up. I'm wondering if everyone recognized his voice when he did,
because it's so rare. They all think,
said,
"What voice is that? Who is that?"
And said something about demographics and the Israeli take on certain demographics, and some of their decision making is being made on that. Did we circle back enough to that question for you to actually get your point out, if you can remember it, before Patty and I actually hijacked the conversation and took it down the 12 rabbit holes we have since?
Well, I think we were just talking about like why the one state solution was probably in the near term not a viable
Or like,
solution.
even if you could solve the problem of violence, would it be in Israel's interest to have a one state solution? Like, even if the fairy godmother came down and sprinkled peace dust over the entire Middle East, would this be something that Israel or the average Israeli supported, knowing that, say, 40 years from now, there could be a Palestinian electoral majority?
Yeah, well, that's the issue, right? Like, you pointed out that if the Palestinians become more prosperous, and their birth rates will decline to that of like, because secular Israeli birth rates are on the same decline that the rest of the developed world is.
Let's grab some stats on that.
So they're being outbred by Palestinians because the Palestinians are living in scarcity,
Right.
and that's just what happens.
And also gender equal societies have lower birth rates than, how would you say, what's the opposite of gender? Gender unequal, I guess. Is that the term?
without the gender equality, like
Gender imbalanced?
Yeah, I guess.
well,
Imbalance doesn't quite cover it. It sounds
no,
too
it's
benign.
not
if the only
patriarchal for the better.
Yeah, patriarchal's the word.
It would be, because if the only method of survival a woman has is to be a broodmare, then that's what she's going to do.
Yeah. So the broodmare, I was just thinking, probably a little bit more than a broodmare, but anyway. But yeah, like if in the more lesser developed, more patriarchal societies, then obviously women spend the majority of their time as housekeeping and domestic tasks and raising children. Because children are valuable in societies that aren't developed. But
they are.
They're not as valuable in societies that are developed. Yeah. Right? Like when you don't need...
Children are a method of survival.
Yeah, they're the retirement plan.
Yeah, they are.
But yeah, so but like, even not even like pre-industrial revolution, but just 60 years ago, 70 years ago, right? Like if you lived on a farm, it was helpful to have 10 kids because you needed the labor,
Yeah.
right? Now you don't.
Hey, do you know what? Take a stab. What do you think the population of Israel is?
I think we figured this out last time. It's 9 to 10 million now.
Yeah, that surprised
9
me.
million, yeah.
9.5 million people.
But I think only about 7 are actually
Holy
Jewish.
cats. 73.5%. 7.145 million people are Jews.
Yeah.
70%.
Yep. The Arab community with various religions, excluding Judaism, accounts for 21% or 2.048 million.
So that's 92%.
And 534,000 are classified as others. Probably Christians.
Yeah, probably.
This also includes those with Jewish ancestry but not recognized as Jewish by religious law. Non-Jewish family members of Jewish immigrants, Christian non-Arabs, Muslim non-Arabs, and residents without a distinct ethnic or religious categorization.
Does the 70% include secular, so non-religious?
Yeah, I think there's ethnic Jews.
Yeah,
right?
Ethnic Jews.
Yeah.
Can we?
So they're worried, like if you inject 3 million, 3 million people from Gaza and whatever the West Bank is, and another couple million from the West Bank, and you go to a single state solution, you inject those people.
And you've already got
and you've got a democratic, and you're committed to a democracy.
25 or 2.5 million already. So now you're 5.5 million of 12
to 7 million, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then the other issue. There's the other issue because there's like the ultra orthodox have a special deal in Israel where they're not they
don't
not
pay
subject
taxes.
they're not subject to the draft.
Yep.
And they don't work. They study religion and they're paid they're paid stipends by the Israeli government. Right? So if you get 5 million Arabs,
Which is
in there.
highly controversial in Israel today.
it is very highly controversial in Israel, and that's probably on a program that's on borrowed time. But if you get 5 million Arabs, that stops immediately. Right? Because now those people are going to have representatives in the Knesset.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to say, no, we're not paying for that shit.
No.
Yep.
That's going to stop
for sure.
right now.
And,
right?
you
or
wouldn't
they're
even...
going to want a similar program for Muslim clerics.
Yeah.
Right.
Or, yeah. But you wouldn't even need, all you would need is, wow. Like, you could probably get that now. Again, we're only talking 73% are Jews.
Right.
So let's say this is roughly analogous to your electorate. 20% of your electorate has no dog in that fight. And I mean, the original purpose of this program was that in 1948, again, Israel is being cobbled together by the remnants of the Ashkenazim.
Yep.
Those who survived the Holocaust. And the number of Orthodox Jews, damn, you could fit them in your living room. There was a genuine concern on what was his name, Ben Gurion, and the initial Israeli leadership that these people were going to be lost to history. That there was so few of them left that they were looking at their extirpation just by, once that generation died, they would not be replaced. And they felt that although they were a tiny minority of the Jewish community, that they were an essential part of it, that they were essential to the Jewish identity. That Judaism could not exist as a coherent entity without that Orthodox community.
Yeah.
And so as a way to protect it and keep it extant, they said, okay, we'll exempt them from certain obligations of citizenship. And of course, it was wildly successful. They thrived. And now the rest of society is saying, okay, they don't need these advantages over everyone else. But of course, now they've let it go to such an extent that these ultra-Orthodox communities have their own electoral representation.
They're the balance of power now.
They're the balance of power.
Yeah.
And so now no government can achieve power without the assistance in coalition of the ultra-Orthodox parties, who are never going to consent
Yeah.
to anything like that. But if 25% of your electorate is not even Jewish, maybe that opens up a possibility that that they could balance out. Well, I don't know. Well, as you say, I think it will go away because the rest of the Israeli community is just not going to put up with it.
Yeah, I don't.
Anymore.
Yeah,
They're just not going to.
I think it's a scheme that's on borrowed time.
Yeah.
But
Well,
in the
there's
same
been-
token, that I don't think that any of the ruling Israeli coalitions, because every Israeli government is a coalition government, I don't know that they've really managed to make any peace or any common cause with some of the Arab reps.
I guess
in
not.
the
No.
Knesset, right?
And you know what? I don't know. I do know that there is kind of an Arab party in the Knesset,
I think there's a couple.
but I don't know if they are able to put together a united front as well. It could be the Arab vote is highly fractured.
I think it probably is.
I don't know enough
because
about-
there's more
yeah.
than one Arab.
Yeah, I don't
party.
know enough about their domestic situation.
Yeah, it's a very, very fractured. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's 10 or 12 parties. in the
Shaking my
Knesset.
head.
Yeah.
Shaking my head.
Israeli politics
Because if-
is a whole nother kettle of
If
fish.
you're an
man.
Arab Israeli, it's like, for Christ's sake, pardon me, I mean, ironic. Get your poop grouped and just have one candidate. As if you're going to
Well,
have...
but that's not how it works, right? Because the Knesset seats are awarded on proportional representation, right? So
Yeah, but if each one of a dozen, if they're all individuals if you got 12 separate Arab Israeli parties being represented, right? I don't know. It seems to me you're diluting yourselves considerably.
oh, sure they are, but yeah, for sure. But but then you're who do they make common cause with, right? Because I mean,
each other to start with. That's your starting
But
point.
then who on the Israeli side do they make common? Are they left wing? Are they right wing? Are they in the middle? Right? Likud is, which is Israel's natural governing party, I guess, kind of thing.
Probably, yeah.
Is
Well, it seems
is
to
a
go back and
center
forth.
right party, right?
I mean, but it's more and more aligning itself with the far right. So
Yeah, because that's where it's
Okay, so-
if it's going to compromise, it's going to compromise. In
So
that
just
direction.
looking at a quick article here, as of 2019 stats, Arab residents in Israel is 1.89 million people, 21%. 209,000 of them were Arabs. 14% of the Israeli Arab population are in East Jerusalem alone. And they're also counted in Palestinian statistics. Although 98% of East Jerusalem Palestinians have either Israeli residency permits or Israeli citizenship. The vast majority of the Arab citizens are Muslim, particularly Sunni Muslims. However, there are small minorities of Ahmadiyya Muslims and Shiite Muslims in the northernmost areas who have Israeli citizenship. 82% of the Arab population are Sunni Muslims, but there, again, in addition to the Shias, 9% are Druze, who are regarded as heretics by other Muslims.
I thought Jews were Christians.
No, they are. You're thinking of Maronites. 9% are Druze, and another 9% are Christian, Maronite Christians. But there's also Bedouins. Bedouin Arabs who are Israeli Arabs, who are in the north of Israel and in the Negev desert, who are still half nomadic and live in unrecognized villages. 110,000 Bedouins live in the Negev, 50,000 in the Galilee, 10,000 in the central region. So there you go. They're not all sitting around the same campfire. You know what I mean?
No. Or yes.
Yes.
But
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was the thing he said after? Nothing. I'm joking. Doing my auto from Fish Called Water.
A small number of Finnish Christians moved to Israel in the 1940s before independence and gained citizenship following independence. For the most part, many of the original Finnish settlers intermarried with other communities in the country and therefore remained very small in number. That's crazy. I wonder why they... I guess they just said, you know
fascinating.
what? We are sick and tired of the goddamn snow.
Hot tubs be damned.
Yeah, we're out of here. We're done. I am not ever shoveling a sidewalk ever again.
We're going to the permanent sauna.
Yeah, we're going to the permanent sauna. Yeah, no kidding.
Sauna, as they say. Yeah, sure. We can take a break.
Yep.
Come back. All right, we actually came back from this break.
Yep. 26% of women and 40% of men are overweight in Israel. Jeez, didn't know about that. Okay, anyway, future projections. Israel's demography is really quite healthy, where they have an average of 3 kids per person, although it doesn't seem to really break it down.
3 kids per person or per two
woman.
people?
Per woman.
Okay, per couple.
Yeah. When the average is 0.6. Say, for example,
in the rest of the world.
Of similar standard of living. But it doesn't really break it down, although that is declining. They do figure that it is going to decline to a 1.4% population growth by 2035. And at 2035...
But it's still growth.
At 2035, they estimate that the Muslim population will still by 2035, Jewish population growth will level out. However, Muslim population growth will still be climbing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, hang on.
Get a grip.
Sorry, the other way around. 2013, the Central Bureau of Israeli Statistics released a demographic report projecting that Israel's population would grow to 11.4 million by 2035, with the Jewish population numbering 8.3 million, or 73%, the Arab population at 2.6 million, or 23%. This includes some 2.3 million Muslims, 20% of the population, 185,000 Druze, 152,000 Christians. The report predicts that the Israeli population growth rate will decline to 1.4% annually, with growth in the Muslim population remaining higher than in the Jewish population until 2035, at which point the Jewish population will begin growing the fastest. So there you go.
Interesting.
Those are their projections.
And
those were their projections in 2013. But interesting to dare to compare 10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. The demographic predictions have a history of being really, really wrong.
Yeah.
In 2017, the Central Bureau of Statistics projected Israel's population would rise to about 18 million in 2059, including 14.4 million Jews, 3.6 million Arabs. Of the Jewish population, about 5.25 million would be the ultra-Orthodox. Overall, the forecast projected that 49% of the population would either be ultra-Orthodox Jews or Arabs. 29% for the ultra-Orthodox, 20% for the Arabs. It also projected a population of 20 million in 2065. Jews and other non-Arabs are expected to compose 81% of the population in 2065, with Arabs making up 19% of that. About 32% of that population is expected to be ultra-Orthodox. So there you go. So they are punching above their weight politically, I would say. But yeah, that's I guess what I wanted to know about the demographics of it, if that's to be believed.
There we go.
It is the always reliable Wikipedia.
Yes, indeed.
Well, we came into this not knowing what we were going to talk about. I suggested this subject, and we've managed to do well with it so far, I think.
So far. I would also like to talk about how, again, it's had ripple effects outside of the region. To note, the riots in Ireland, I don't think they would have happened if they hadn't been preceded by such massive pro-Palestinian protests earlier in the month.
You talk about what happened yesterday?
The last couple of days. Yeah, it's been, I think, 3 days of riots in Dublin.
My understanding is that came out of those were precipitated by a stabbing of children by an unidentified male and they're being very, very reticent about any details.
Right, but he has been identified. He was he was an Algerian immigrant.
Okay,
And this is what
so-
one of the things that precipitated it was how the state and the media went to extraordinary measures to prevent the identification of this attacker.
Well, to the extent that, and I get it, because for domestic security reasons, you're trying to keep a grip on the situation. I get that,
Right.
right? But I found that article was absolutely, it told me nothing.
Well,
Right, it told me that- it told me
depends on
that-
what article you're looking at, right?
It told me that something had occurred.
Where was the source of this article? What
I
were you
can't
looking
remember.
at?
It was in my Apple News feed. So
Okay, well, that says a lot right there.
off the top of my head, I'm gonna say it was Reuters. But
Okay.
wait, I'll see if I can find it.
I don't think the conflict is going to successfully drive that wedge between America and Israel. In that the American, whatever popular will there may be on the street in the United States, I think enough of what we would call the deep state of America, the foreign policy establishment, the permanent employees of the executive branch, I think there's far too great a consensus within that community that Israel is a useful ally of the United States and should be supported. So
I think on aggregate,
Yeah.
you're gonna get that.
now, again, this may not be like, who knows? They may succeed in turning the opinion of the American street, but it's going to take several electoral cycles. Like we're talking a couple of decades before that will ever translate into active foreign policy.
There's no question
Coming out of the United States.
I just checked it. It is Reuters that
It
I
made
got
that,
this
yeah.
from.
So
but
yeah,
that's
but super vague, not wanting
because-
to talk about it, and which is kind of an example of what infuriated the Irish population, because they are also experiencing, like the rest of Europe, severe tensions in regard to mass immigration, particularly immigration from the Muslim world.
yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone's freaking out as to how many Buddhist temples are being built in Oslo and County Cork. It's the impact of an unassimilable Muslim population into these countries. I'd say probably Muslim, maybe African too, just trying to speak pan-Europeanly. And that the shock of the population by seeing these massive pro-Palestinian protests within their domestic Muslim communities,
So I think
really has upset a lot of people in the Western world. Realize, yeah, we do have a very large Muslim community here, but I don't think they realized how large it was, and I don't think they realized the muscle it could flex. And now they are very, very alarmed and upset about it, which might not have happened if it weren't for the actions of what was it, October 22nd? When were the Hamas attacks?
October 6th.
Or 6th,
I think it was the
7th?
6th, 7th.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that would have happened had there not been those pre-orchestrated pro-Palestinian mass protests across the Western world.
Well, I think that it's a very interesting question you've asked. So, broad strokes, my answer to is actually the effects in the rest of the world it's internal to the rest of the world. If you catch my meaning, it's got nothing. It's no longer has anything to do with Hamas. Now,
Exactly. It just triggered a different event.
Now we've got. And I'm going to use the word intellectual. And I feel this is actually a misnomer of a term to be using. Like a quasi-intellectual debate going on with our society, and soul searching, which isn't even accurate either,
or a philosophical, I guess,
right?
Or
because
domestic political debate.
Because it has actually shocked me, and we've talked about this on end about how people are hitching their wagons to Hamas when they think they're hitching their wagon to the Palestinian question.
Well, I think that's a parallel issue, but a different one. The question of how much immigration is good is related and influencing, but a separate issue from why have other political factions allied themselves with Hamas? Like, for example, LGBTQ. Why is there such a thing as Queers for Palestine? Like, what the hell are they hitching their wagon to? Or why have, say, university campuses thrown themselves so? And I don't want to hurt your feelings, bud, but we gotta say it. Why has the left thrown itself so completely into the Hamas camp?
Because that's the way of things these days, right? Wokeism is all about.
But why?
It's because of the lack of critical thinking anymore, right? It's this whole, I know what I know, and that's all that matters, right?
Okay,
it's
but
this whole,
what does the left gain from a Hamas victory? Let's look at this functionally. Is it a full-out, hardcore, balls-to-the-walls, Cloward Piven, burn it all down? Is it a desire to destabilize domestic society?
I don't think it even knows.
I don't know.
It's again, it's all about moral indignation. I see that on both sides, right? So that was our starting point. How did the effect of the Hamas actions? How is it reflected now in
what's
the
the
rest
ripple
of the
over
world?
here?
So this is the ripple over here,
Yeah.
right? And so on the one hand, again, I just point to these are the days we lived in. Wokeism is like that. So it's got this knee-jerk reaction, and it's our moral prerogative is to step up and support Palestine, right? Without any consideration of what they're actually speaking of, right? You know, again, are you talking Palestine, or are you actually talking Hamas? Because if you're talking, those are two very different questions.
two different very questions,
right? And then you need to be able to separate the Palestinian question from what Hamas did on October 7th.
And there's not a lot of that.
Right? There's none of that. I cannot believe the extent that the coverage has become about, well, now we're going to protest Israel. For what?
Yeah.
Right? I am actually outraged that's the question right now. You got people stomping on Israeli flags at demonstrations across North America and Europe.
And they're being pretty open. Like, there's no hidden agenda here. I mean, from the river to the sea is pretty clear cut. Like, we know what that means.
Very interesting. And I've Steve Zackley wants to say
there was
something.
that whole cohort of usually like academics who were like, this is what decolonization looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Those
guys learned their lesson. They shut up pretty quick.
Again,
when they realized it could cost them their jobs.
Again, we're clouding the issue
but
there,
if
right?
you like translated that to Canada.
Yes.
So you want like.
Yes.
So the guys from Oka to dig up their AK-47s and start shooting at people in universities because they're all colonizers.
And this connection was widely understood in the new media.
Yeah. So and
alarmingly so.
That's my whole point. That's the lack of critical thinking I'm talking about. It's like you're just this knee-jerk, unthinking, embracing of a concept.
Obedience?
Well, no, it's not.
My thought leaders tell me to think this way, therefore I think this way, and I don't really think about it.
No, it's obedience to themselves. I mean, they're part of a movement, but as individuals, right? You know, it's just this whole. I'm kind of going along for the ride, but I'm going along for the ride because I don't have any.
They are herd people. They are into group. If I can be devil's advocate, they are into groupthink.
Okay, so hold that thought because this is going to be my response, right? What we have, if we're looking at the Irish events the last couple of days, right? So we have the situation that's already occurred in Israel. And that's become what's happening in Gaza. And at the same time, we've got all these protests going on back and forth. Protests and counter-protests. And which one's the protest and which one's the counter-protest, I can't even tell anymore, right? Amidst all that ugliness already, we have some dickhead pulls out a knife, and he happens to be an Arab, and now I'm going to stab some kids, right? Of course, people are outraged. This is the same outrage that the people of Israel just experienced 6 weeks ago, right? No surprise there, right? But when we're talking about herd mentality, and this is where I see it on the right as well. So all these people are coming out; they're outraged, right? And you talked earlier about, okay, we've got a problem perceptually in how we view immigration, particularly immigration from certain areas, and
multiculturalism. I guess.
multiculturalism, and let's put those of the Islamic faith in there. Right? And I specifically use those words because I'm not trying to denigrate them for that. Right?
Okay, denigrate the people who are questioning
No,
immigration.
I'm not trying to denigrate the people of Islamic faith either.
Okay, gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So I'm just saying, okay, it is what it is. Right? This is what we're looking at here.
Okay.
Right? What I watch out for, which we as a society need to be able to look out for, is those people having that reaction, and it's also an emotional reaction, and it's a herd reaction, right? Because that's what I have always seen coming from the right and the anti-immigration movements, particularly in Europe. Now we're starting to see that ugliness here, and I attribute that to right thinking,
Okay.
as in far right, or as in the political spectrum, as in
I'd be comfortable
not
with you
correct.
just saying that mainstream right.
I'm not. Okay,
Like
but
I don't take offense if you say that that's right wing thinking, because I think it is.
what I'm trying to clarify is I don't mean right thinking as in correct.
No. I mean like conservative thought.
Yes.
That conservative thought is always going to be very reluctant to mass immigration.
Right.
Always.
So, but in this particular case,
At best reluctant.
right? Like I said, we've got one guy who did this horrific thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And he
Who
happens.
happened to be, in other words, I'm going to say to you, not knowing any of the facts, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say he did not do it as a religious motivation. I'm pretty, I will lay you, not knowing anything about it, I'll lay $10 on the table right now and say he did not scream Allahu Akbar as he stabbed those people.
Probably not.
I bet you he was just nuts.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate because I feel it's playing devil's advocate here. That there are probably, now that you've said that, that could have been just an in-the-moment thing.
Yep.
Based on, because
Crime of passion.
Because everything else that's happened up to
Yep.
now, maybe he's been denigrated for being Algerian up to
Who
this
knows?
point, right?
Who knows?
So, and that's, but
Goddamn Irish, it's their own fault.
No,
Wasn't that what you said?
no.
He was denigrated he may have been denigrated for
He
being
may-
Algerian,
so-
and he snapped.
so,
God damn, Mix had it coming. It's their own fault. If they weren't such ignorant pricks, they'd.
So at best, all you can say that Trent is saying is that maybe the Irish had it coming. At best.
Maybe. It
Right?
alarms me that your thoughts even
Well,
went
no,
that
because I'm
way.
just saying that that's possible. But to me now we're starting to split hairs unnecessarily, right? So we're just in this situation. But again, having mentioned what I did about Christopher Hitchens and his extreme views on Islam earlier, which I think is, like anything else, the way he presented it, very rationally, is an important prism to filter anyone to filter any of their thoughts through regarding any subject. Look at me qualifying everything I was about to come out of my mouth.
Oh, you
Right?
have to.
Well, no, it's
Kind of have to. You're picking out, props to you. You're picking out a very, very delicate, and if you're going to make this argument work, it has to be highly structured
well, and
very nuanced.
so this has always been my worry, that we have now this Algerian is representative in people's minds of a whole people.
Yes.
And now we're going to ascribe what he did to every person of that people. But it's a potential. And one of the things I'm going to say, it's like every time on Facebook, I have one of my white friends, by which I mean Facebook
White.
friends.
Do you hang out with white people?
I do.
What's wrong with you?
I know.
A decent leftist like yourself
I
actually
know.
talking to
It's-
white people?
Once
you
in a
should
while,
be hating them.
Once in a while, we
Don't you
talk
do
to
what you're
each other.
told?
Well, see, the thing
My
is,
God.
I have to hang out with white people because I'm a cis white male,
Oh my God!
straight.
Oh, well, you said cis.
So
Now saying cis straight, you're just rubbing our faces in.
So obviously, no other white person that isn't all of those things together can talk to me.
God, these
Right?
crackers.
So, I don't fit
Or
with
is
the
it
left.
the BIPOC community is not allowed to talk to you?
Well,
if you weren't such an oppressor, maybe
Such a colonialist.
But-
yes.
so
Look in the mirror, Trent.
Whenever-
Look in the mirror.
whenever I see a post from anyone, it says, and it's referenced someone of a visible minority group
Yeah.
who's committed some crime,
Yep.
an assault, a sexual assault,
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
Oh, look.
Another triumph of immigration.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, I want to just go and just flip through the stats. Let's find the stats for how many
Right.
white guys do that in this
Right.
country. I'm betting there's a lot more of them. So
Probably,
just
yes.
stop.
Probably.
Stop.
However, I think the root of it is they're saying that, look, we should be doing a better job of screening immigrants.
Well,
Like, instead of a come one, come all, should we not look at immigration to say, okay, look, what benefit does this do Canadians derive, or what benefit does the host nation derive from the immigrant? And that question is not being asked.
okay. So let me, for the sake of this argument, say I agree with that point. That's a reasonable point. I'm not going to get into whether I actually feel it's reasonable or not right now. Right.
Right. You're not saying
Okay.
you're not saying you support it, but you're saying an argument could be made.
Right. So let's, there's some rationale
Yeah.
behind what you said,
Yeah.
but let's not pick that apart
Yeah.
right now.
You're not subscribing
Okay.
to it. You're just saying that.
But let's say we do that.
Okay.
All right. As a society, we
Yep.
say, okay, that's an acceptable approach
Yep.
to things. That's not
Yep.
unreasonable, right? Then, all right. So the same people who are thinking that, the same people who are pushing that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, let's start looking at our own people who are doing that more, and probably more proportional to the population. There's probably more white guys
Okay.
doing that same thing. So let's look at those guys and how they
But how is
contribute
that
to our
related?
society. Well, we're looking at
Okay. Well, you're
Okay.
going to have that problem no matter what. You're
We are
stuck with a domestic crime problem.
Right.
Why are you trying to exacerbate it? By importing criminals.
because
Who benefits?
to me the whole point is this, right? That if we're going to limit our definition of a
Yeah.
good citizen
Yeah.
to immigration simply because immigration itself provides the tool to do so, right? That to me is like, yeah, are we? I guess it's in response to the whole, oh look, of course it was an
Yeah.
immigrant thing, right?
Yeah.
Because that thinking is flawed. Right there, it's flawed, and I disagree with it. Yes, you're going to point to an immigrant doing that, but you know what? That loses all its teeth when you compare it to the fact that there are
Okay,
plenty
so
of
what you're saying is we shouldn't try and prevent crime, or no, we shouldn't try and prevent crime because there's other crime already happening.
No, what I'm saying is put it in context. A guy committed a crime.
okay.
It was a bad
Okay.
crime. He happens to be an immigrant.
And
All
if
right?
we hadn't let him in the country, he wouldn't have been here to commit that crime.
Yeah, I mean, that's one logical way of looking at it. But,
What's the other logical way of looking at it? Is there any other logical way of looking at it?
well, first of all,
If he was not here, he could not have committed that crime.
well, here's the thing. I need to say 2.5 things. I need you
Okay.
I need to be able to stop you from pouncing on the first one.
Okay. Okay. Just demarcate them so I know which one is which.
I can't even remember what they are anymore. My
my
memory is so
God!
fucking shot these days.
That's because you hang out with too many white people.
Yeah.
Did you forget to take your Adderall this morning?
I didn't actually. I actually remembered to take it this morning, but it's not Adderall.
No, it's Oppressiviva, and Patriarchia is the
Patriarchia.
Yeah, and Oppressia are the two medications he takes.
Right.
It's, yeah.
I just. Oh man! Sometimes I just have a string of thoughts, and they're all like, "Yay!" And then, all I need is a little bit of sidetracking.
Well, okay.
And I made the mistake of admonishing you, saying, "I
okay.
need you to let me just say these 3 fucking things." And then by the time I said that, I'd forgotten what the 3 things
well,
were.
yeah, just demarcate them when they come back, so I know which one is which. Because sometimes I can't tell what they are. Yeah, the
Well, I mean,
pre-admonishment.
okay, I think part of it was
Yeah.
it is a bit of a crapshoot,
Yeah.
like because how do you identify whether this person is going to be a criminal or not, right? And especially in a society where we pride ourselves on such things as free speech and guilty, innocent until proven guilty.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know what the other way around there.
Yep.
Just with my leftist leanings there.
I didn't say a word, Trent. I didn't say a word.
I was getting ahead of the game there,
Yeah.
right? You know, that's
Well, but there are definite things that could be done. Absolutely, 100%. And there are also, we could start with a very basic set of criteria.
I've only done 2 of my points.
Yeah, I didn't even know you started on your points. You said
those were my 2 points.
Okay, so the first point is, how do we assess the potential of criminality?
Right.
Okay.
And again, even if we're doing that, and I guess this ties into multiculturalism, and I believe we are a nation that's built on immigration, because even if I point out that a bunch of white guys have done the same crimes, probably out of proportion to their prorated amount within society, right? Even their families were immigrants at some point, unless you're native.
So if we were gonna,
so it's
okay. So is that a second point, or are you leading into another point?
The second point is that I find it a bit of a nothing burger. I have, it just has no teeth for me. It's like, listen, yeah, great, you're right. At a certain level, you are right that we could have caught this guy coming in, right? But we aren't doing anything to identify people in our society, right? So again, to me,
because we allow other crime, we shouldn't worry about. Because we have crime already, we shouldn't worry about other crime. That's point number 2.
I guess what I'm saying is,
we got crime, so we got crime.
When do we measure this? Right? Do we measure it? When do we measure the potential versus the actuality of someone who's going to commit a criminal act, right? And again, now I'm speaking in ideal terms. Now we're talking the same way that you embrace freedom of speech and individual rights and libertarians. Hang on,
I'm just asking for clarity.
So let's see if I give it to you.
Okay,
and then you can ask. Right, we're in allowing someone to come into this country already under whatever system we already rate them on, and we're rating them on something.
Okay,
right? We are. It could be argued, in opposition to what you've been saying, that what we are actually at an ideal level saying is we accept you based on these such and such criteria, knowing that you may have the potential to commit a criminal act, just like all the other members, citizens of this nation. And then if you do so, then we're going to have to deal with it.
So we accept criminality is just an unfortunate part of the human condition, and we do not consider it a barrier to immigration.
Because it's potential criminal. Now, if in
potential criminality is a part of the human condition, therefore we do not consider it a barrier to immigration.
Right. No. However, I'm assuming that
I'm not going to subscribe to that, but I can see how that argument could be made.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm assuming that. Sorry, Steve. I'm assuming that
he's oppressing you.
We're going to have a vetting process.
I think I'm going to try and support his point here.
Oh shit!
Whoa!
I'm going to shut up.
Whoa!
Just as I was searching through some stories here, because actually I hadn't heard about these because I don't watch any other news.
Oh, okay.
And so I go through some stories. Evidently, the guy, while he was Algerian, was a naturalized Irish citizen and had been in Ireland for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm pretty sure it had nothing to do with his religion.
Probably not. No, no. Something happened to him. He went nuts.
Yeah, he was just nuts.
Right. So to predict criminality 20 years down the road, just nobody's going to be able to do that.
Nope.
Let alone a government.
Nope. Probably not.
So.
All right. I'm right.
No.
Hey, I'm right.
Yes and no.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
No, I'm left.
That too. But
yeah, no, I don't. Again, I'm saying that the underlying question is should a polity be allowed to determine immigration based on the potential benefit to the host country?
Absolutely.
And this has not been done. This has not been established. Or this consensus has never been put forward in the Western world. I think there are two underlying tensions in immigration. One was this criteria was never established. The idea was always that you should allow immigration because you should allow immigration. There was never any reason given. And the second was that the populations were never consulted. No government in the Western world ever put it before their population and said, hey man, we want to open up mass immigration and massively and structurally demographically changed the country. What do you think? This was never, ever put out into the body politic. The debate has always been suppressed through political correctness. Someone says, I don't know about this immigration. Racist! You're a racist! You're a horrible Nazi! You're a racist! And they say, okay, I won't say anything. I won't say anything.
You know what? I'm going to respond to all of this, right? In that there are two things, and there's a third thing, right? Okay, maybe people weren't consulted.
Okay, hold on. First was, damn. Okay, your second point was the potential criminality should not be a factor.
No, I'm talking about your points.
Yeah, but you were good. Before we get down this rabbit hole, you said you wanted to make 3 points.
I've made them.
What was the third?
I don't know. I actually said 2.5, and I made them all.
Okay, what was the first?
I can't remember.
I can't remember either. What's wrong?
It was measuring the potential of an immigrant before he got here.
How could we possibly establish a criteria
right
to determine whether or not someone is good for the country?
Well, no, it wasn't that. It was like if we're not going to allow for that potential. And one of the things I was going to say after the fact, once we got into it, was like, I'm assuming we're vetting these people. So if someone says, let's see, gangland leader in Kashmir, never convicted, we're probably not going to let them into the country, right? So
the track record does not support that assumption.
How do you vet the guy from, say a guy coming from, say, Benghazi right now, right?
Yeah.
Libya is a failed state.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you vet that guy?
Okay, so just to clarify, are we going to re-examine that first point? How do we establish a criteria for whether or not an immigrant is good for the host country?
Okay, well, that's
Is that what we're doing?
That's an episode unto itself. No, I want to respond to your
then
point.
Fine, then let's table that for another episode.
You just made 3 points, right? Or 2 points about the problem with
the
immigration.
population was never consulted.
Okay.
As to the scope that was involved, they were
Okay.
never consulted. There was no consent of the people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what's causing a lot of this. This tension now is
Okay.
exploding.
Next point.
And the second was that there was no. What was my first? I'm sorry, Dan. It just escaped from me.
If I can over contextualize, as is my want. In North America,
want. You have to emphasize the O, not the A.
whatever.
Yeah.
Want.
My want. In North America, immigration's always been baked in the cake, right? Like in Canada and the
Yes.
US, right? Like there was
Yep.
never
It has
a
always
point
been
where it
baked
was
in the cake.
there was not going to be immigration, right?
Yep.
So
It was the only question of how
yeah.
and under what means. Yeah.
And since it was already baked in the cake, the government
Yep.
never had to ask or come to a concession
Yep.
with the policy of who's coming in.
Yep.
They got to
And
decide.
how. Yep.
They got to decide, right? And it was never put to the populace. In Europe, I think the legacy becomes post-World War because in West Germany's
Yep.
constitution, they were not allowed to refuse immigrants.
Right.
Right? And then that infected the EU.
And that they had to be a post-Westphalian state.
Yes.
They could not culturally bring themselves to consider themselves a nation state.
Yeah. So then they were unified, and then that became, I think, something that infected the EU.
Well, I mean,
And
but
that-
sorry.
I hate
Guys,
the word.
I know what the first point
okay,
was.
What was it?
The first point was that there was never the establishment that the purpose of immigration is the benefit of the host state. It has always been the convention that the purpose of immigration is to benefit the immigrant. So
I
that's the first
disagree.
point.
I disagree. Okay.
Okay, fine, fair enough. But those are my 2 points, and this.
Okay.
and that those 2
Criteria?
points are the cause of the backlash we are seeing today.
Criterion and consultation. Got it. Okay, Steve, carry on.
Yeah, well, you said you were just saying you didn't like that. What I said.
Well, I
the
think the
German
word-
policy, the policy that was forced on Germany, kind of infected the EU because
The use of the word infection is really, really pejorative here.
well, it is kind of pejorative
accurate.
because
Pejorative, yes. Accurate, yes. It did kind
because
of
it's created a
spread
problem,
through-
right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden,
Okay, if you talk about the problem versus the people, because if you call them the people themselves,
the policy. I'm
infections-
calling them. No, I'm not calling the people.
policy was
the
the problem.
policy
That's
was
why
the
I'm saying.
infection.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right then.
Oh no, not that the people spread through Europe like an infection.
No,
Okay.
the policy. The policy
All
spread through the
Yeah.
EU. Like, So
That would be more like a metastasize. No, I'm kidding. Just
Holy-
poking ya. Just
Holy
poking
shit.
ya.
Here we go, folks.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
That was well done.
a little metastasis. Yeah.
Anyway, so go on. You're talking about how West Germany's policy then kind of was writ large across the EU.
Yeah. And so it was, again...
in the
it was-
post-Maastricht era.
Yeah, and so again, that was never put forward to the populations of those countries, right?
Well, no, because
so
it was-
the question is there of who should come in has never been asked, right?
Yeah.
So the American immigration debate is, well, our immigration system is broken, but in two ways: one, it doesn't let in people who should be allowed in,
Yeah.
and two, we're not doing anything to enforce this tide of people coming across
Yeah.
the southern border.
And again, you're right. Immigration was always baked into the cake
Yeah, there was never going to be not the
of
immigration.
Canada, America, and Australia.
Yeah.
Always. It was always, you could make the argument that it was kind of baked into the cake of South America as well. You could make that argument.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to. You could throw New Zealand and South Africa into that. You can make the argument. I'm not prepared to. But it was immigration done. There were always two preconditions for that. And I'm going to include Canada in this. So let's talk pre-1920. That it was controlled immigration. That it wasn't come one, come all. No conditions, no restrictions.
Pre-1920 American immigration was really quite open.
They still screened immigrants. And they still had an official point of entry.
Yeah, they did.
And the melting
But
pot
in the United
was
States-
not negotiable.
You didn't, yes, but you didn't have to apply for an immigration visa prior
No.
to coming to the U.S. If you
No.
could afford the passage to get yourself to Ellis Island,
Yeah.
and then you pass the physical.
If you pass the physical, that's what I mean. There was conditions. It wasn't like, hey, you have an inherent.
Oh my god!
You don't have an inherent right to just come to America. But again, that was that.
It was
that
Give
pretty
me a
liberal,
cold,
though, right?
you're poor, you're huddled masses. Right there on the frickin' statue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
sure.
remember,
but there were still.
Say, give me.
There were still
the French
conditions.
built the statue.
Yeah, and it was preconceived.
Are you saying
on
that they didn't understand the English language? They wrote it wrong?
mauvais
It was
anglais?
supposed to say
They
something
built it
else on
unsolicited.
That was the popular myth. That was the popular mythology. But it was grounded absolute in the concrete of the melting pot.
Okay.
And the other thing is that,
And there was an explicit rejection
Well-
of what we now know as multiculturalism.
and immigration from that point was, like there weren't people coming from West Africa. There weren't people. Immigration was pretty much
From very
exclusively from Europe.
assimilable populations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
From-
the United States did have restrictions on Asian immigration.
Yes.
It
You're right,
has-
they did, yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely
And
had
so,
restrictions.
and so did Canada as well.
Yep, so did Canada. And again, prior to this, or in this period, let's say like late 19th, early 20th century, there was an expectation of 100% assimilation. And this was a shared expectation, not just of the host population, but the immigrants themselves.
Yeah, and that's probably why the restrictions on Asian immigration were what they were, is because they didn't see those populations as assimilable.
No,
So-
and they resisted, assimilation.
Yeah.
And I think this was a beginning of a divergence in immigration, in that the first immigrants from Europe to come into the United States, the tired, the poor, the huddled masses, wanted to be American.
Yeah.
When the first Asian immigrants came to the United States, the Chinese and Japanese communities that set up on the West Coast, they wanted to stay Chinese and Japanese. They just wanted to live in America and make money there.
Yeah.
So there's a very, very big difference. And I think that explains the reaction of the larger American community and the Canadian community to them. Mm-hmm. That this immigration was always absolutely predicated on the assimilationist model. That you will come here, for example, when you read the biographies of many successful people, or like leading lights in the society, so to speak, and they are the children and grandchildren of immigrants. it is routine that I read that, yeah, this person came here at this and this time, or his grandfather or her mother came here at this and this time, and they changed their names to be more English friendly. Yeah. For example, I was just reading. I just got a new book on a favorite poet of mine, and I read how he was an immigrant from Lebanon, and how he changed his name, or his school actually encouraged him to change his name to make it more friendly to Anglophone to the Anglophone tongue.
Right.
Can you imagine a school doing that today?
Nope.
And so this is again the major difference. Yes, immigration was always baked into the cake in North America and in certain other countries. Yeah. But to use that as a justification for our current model of immigration is incredibly disingenuous.
Maybe I've got so many things to say, but I want to respond to
Let
the
her
last
rip,
thing
buddy.
first.
I saw you taking notes there, and I thought
I had to write them down, or I'd forget them all.
Good,
right?
Good plan.
So let's talk about the name thing, right? And maybe this helps reflect a little bit of insight into Trent, if nothing else. All right.
Where's
what?
I don't have coffee for this.
And I was talking to you, Steve, today about the current work site I'm working on, and this is the way I've always tried to be. When I'm working with someone, if obviously if they're a visible minority, I'm going to note that, and
be racist.
I'm going to want to interact with them, right? And the
establish that your supremacy right early on, and
now that comes later.
God, I'm such a dick. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, at the most fundamental human level, our interaction is based on some very personal things. One of them being our names. So I'm going to give the example. Actually, this was a couple of clients ago, right? There was a guy I'd heard of for the first few days, and his name was Gary.
Okay.
And I finally met Gary on day 3.
Yep.
Right. And this guy is as Indian as Indian comes, East Indian, from the Indian South continent, and somewhere south because he was dark.
Yeah.
And he had the
Dravidian extraction.
Thick accent.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
And I said to him, I'm betting Gary's not your real name. I'm betting Gary's not.
What do you mean real name?
Okay, sorry.
Oh my
actually,
God.
I'll tell you.
What a racist.
I'll tell you how I actually worded it to him. All right.
I'm only half kidding.
I said, I'm betting Gary's not the name your mother gave you.
Yeah.
And he thought about it for a second. He looked at me and he thought about it, and he kind of did that little shrug and tilted his head. Like, you're right. I said, do you mind if I ask what it is? And he said, it's Gurvinder.
Sure.
And I said, okay, Gurvinder.
Oh, okay. And Gary is kind of an anglicization.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you prefer I call you?
Yeah.
And he thought about that, and he did the same little shrug and bouncing of his head, and he said, Gurvinder, right? So in my mind, I think, and I do that now. I do that at my current work site. The people whose names, I try to get around, and if I have to, I write it down in this same book that I've got right here, right?
Sure.
And if you look through the page, so I've got one guy's name, and he's Sikh, and there's a bit of a struggle. But right below it, I've written the name Jack,
right?
Because there's a guy named Jack who I keep calling Sam for some stupid fucking reason. So it's at all levels. So to me, it's important to get to know a person's name.
Okay.
And we should be making that effort. Right, so I think we have now. It doesn't make us racist not to, because you were talking about how I'm kind of responding to what you're saying, how your friend got asked to anglicize his name back in the day, but how
or this poet.
Okay, but now you can get away with doing that nowadays, right? Because that would be racist. I'm saying it's not racist to expect. It's not racist to expect ourselves as the quote unquote whiteys.
Okay. No one said it was, though.
That's what I'm saying.
But if I asked someone to say, hey, man, could you anglicize your name for the purpose so that the other staff are better able to communicate with you, that would be condemned as racist.
Yeah. And I'm not actually at this point accusing you of anything. It's just this is what brought to mind.
But would you agree that individual would be accused of racism?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They'd certainly risk it.
Yeah.
Right? They would certainly risk it. Right.
Do you think it is racist to ask someone to change their name to fit better into the dominant
Well, I think
language?
that's what I'm getting at, is that, you know what? It wouldn't kill us to try and just, like, I know that your name is Patty. Actually, I know it's not, but this is what we call you, right?
But like, let's say I had
and I
a
know
name.
that his name is Steve.
Let's say I had a name that, let's say I insisted on being referred to by my Gaelic name, which the phonetics, now of course, the same characters, same Roman characters,
Patrick.
but completely, say, especially in my last name, completely different phonetics. Very difficult for English speakers to. I'm a case in point. My last name is very different or very difficult for English speakers to pronounce. So therefore, my ancestors, my 3 times great grandfather, changed his name.
Yes.
To better accommodate the majority population.
And you're absolutely right.
Is that wrong to expect that?
I'd say nowadays it's not necessary.
Is it wrong?
Okay, if you're going to push that,
I am.
I'm going to push
it.
that.
Is it wrong?
I'm going to say it is wrong.
Okay, fair enough.
That if your grandfather came over today,
Yep.
if I were meeting you for the first time, and you were to tell me your last name
Yep.
in Gaelic,
Yep.
I would go with that.
Or,
and I would
or let's say you only encountered me, say, through a document, say at your place of work,
Yeah.
and said, how the hell do I pronounce
I would look on it as my responsibility
Yeah.
to learn to say that the way it's meant to be said.
So in other words, the host population must accommodate the immigrant.
That's how you're choosing to present it.
Is that a false extrapolation? Is that wrong? If it's right on the individual level, why is it not suddenly right on the macro level? Where does the logic end? Where's the break? If this is right on the individual level, is it not right on the societal level?
No, I did say that when we got into this particular topic, that now we're getting some insight into Trent's brain.
Okay.
All right. Because it's the same as how I consider myself, both kind of social left, like out of concern for my fellow human being, and
yet a horrible, exploitative, conservative capitalist who doesn't give a fuck about people and wants to run them into the ground. Just come on over here and sit beside me, buddy.
Okay. All right. And at the same time, I consider myself a libertarian.
Right.
Steve and I have a lot of things in common. Because
you're both horrible people.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm less horrible. I'm more horrible than Steve. Obviously,
more.
I'm more horrible than Steve because I'm going to get outvoted in any vote on that, anyways. So, my point is that when it comes to the things I espouse, really it comes down to my upbringing and my feelings that. Because I don't have religion to go to. I just have my upbringing by my parents and the society I've lived within, and some of that now includes, my time in the military. These are all fundamental values. They define me, right? And I realize, and there's a long way to get to your point, that what I seek to see and respect, I hope to expect out of my fellow beings as individuals, is that same concern for their fellow man, much in the way it's reflected in me, because that's how I understand things to be good.
Okay,
all right? So by the same token, right, you're asking me if we as a society,
yes,
right, and you always put it in these extreme terms, right,
black and white terms,
right,
yes,
and well, I mean, if
I ask you to make a decision.
It is unnecessary to make a decision, and I refute the need.
I just ask you to make a decision.
I refute the need to put everything in black and white terms all the time, because there is nothing in this life, in this universe, in the whole history of humanity, that has ever been fully black and white. All right? There is always some measure of gray. Some of it will be approaching black, some of it will be approaching white, but most of it is way closer to the middle than it is to the extremes, because it's all complex and paradoxical. And there's a really long way of getting around to the fact that
you admit you just have a logical inconsistency in your point.
I am not going to speak for whether or not all of our society should do this, because I do not feel that it is my place, right? I feel as an individual that something should be a certain way, and I would hope that my society as a whole would reflect that in the same way that it just wouldn't even need to be a debate between you and I. That if someone comes into this country, it would just be part of our social makeup that if an immigrant comes to this country and they present us their first and last names, we go, oh, and how do you pronounce that? And learn to do it, right? For the sake of learning to do it. And that's the whole point, is because that means I'm a better me. It's got nothing to do with them. It's not anything to do with me bowing down to them coming into this country. Oh my God, heaven forbid I should have to make an effort to learn someone's fucking name. Oh no.
So, again,
yes, God damn it, we should be fucking doing it.
the host nation must accommodate the immigrant.
Fuck the host nation. All
Just,
right.
hey man, I just wanted.
All right.
Like what you were saying, like how our conversations go in that way.
Glad that's out there. Bye.
I do find that most conversations, most confrontations of ideas between left and right, whether it's my own personal experience or whether it's a debate that I'm watching, tend to follow that pattern. The right wants specifics and details.
Yeah.
The left does not. The left the left prefers to keep things vague and undefined.
I think you'll find right now when we talk about woke, they're not about vague and undefined. They are very specific about what they're talking about. It's just not very well thought out. In fact, they can't handle the fact that you can point out some very glaring holes in their thinking.
Yeah,
right?
and that's when and for like that's not to get sidetracked, but yeah, that'll happen. To someone on the right points out the massive glaring hole in their logical process, and they immediately back away from that. They don't want to examine the details of that. They avoid it, and they try and keep things, again, if they look at things in a macro, low resolution, like a 10,000 foot level, those holes become very small the further back you get, and they become indistinguishable.
Yeah.
So the right keeps trying to pull them into specifics, keeps trying to pull them into boots on the ground impacts on society, and the left pulls away, and keeps wanting to look at things from a macro view, from far away.
Again, I would point out and argue that is recent left, the last 10, 15 years.
I'd say
Right?
eternal.
And, I think it's important to distinguish between you as a representative speaker of the right.
Oh no!
I'm
saying
and the right broad strokes.
Even when I watch, say, a debate between Boghossian and Shapiro online, I feel the same dynamic is happening.
That's great. But you guys are all intellectuals. You've got very sharp minds. You're very well informed, and you construct great theses and present them well, and you're willing to debate them. Right? What I'm saying, because the people on the left that you are talking about right now, these are not your greatest thinkers of the left. In fact, they're not thinkers at all. And I would point out...
This is where you're talking about woke?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And there are plenty of
Just
people
want
on...
to be sure to exclude yourself. That's all.
Thank you.
And there's a
plenty
lot
of people
on the left
right,
who do think,
plenty of people on the right who are knee-jerk, reactionary, and can be pretty fucking ignorant. In fact, in my mind, a lot of the most... And it's one of those things, to flip Lincoln on his head, the angels of our worst natures are typically found in the emotional, irrational, ignorant reactions of the right. That's why I see them. So I'm saying,
could we say emotional and ignorant reactions? Period.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying.
Human emotion tends to not be a great decision maker,
which plays into the Dublin conversation, right? And there's a lot of that. So I'm saying the only reason I'm bringing it up right now is because you're saying on the left. I'm agreeing with you, right? But there's plenty enough of it on the right. And my experience over my lifetime is that I've seen more of it on the right until recently, when the left just kind of fell apart. It's like they sucked their brains out of their ears, and
like the emergence of the woke.
Yeah, the woke
phenomenon.
is just absolutely
baffling.
Have I ever mentioned that my favorite Andy Capp? And I know it's weird to be mentioning Andy Capp at all these days.
We're all about the relevant cultural references.
Yes.
So so Andy Capp's at the bar, and someone from the right makes a comment. Says, "You shut up," and then another guy says, "Yeah, that's right. That's right, Andy, give him shit." And he's like, "Yeah, you shut up too," right? And then Flo looks at the camera, right? And she goes, "Andy's a moderate." he makes enemies left and right.
Yeah.
You know, and I've tried to find that one because you know, again, you don't want to quote Andy Capp too much, but I've always loved that one, right? Anyways, these are the points I want to throw back out there.
Next one.
The melting pot being inviolable. I agree with you to a certain extent that that's what America demands of its people. It's a melting pot, not a mosaic.
Well,
and
maybe not now, but it did traditionally. Yeah,
it
for
did.
sure.
But even then, right? You'd always have in your New Yorks and your Chicago's. You had your Jewish community, you had your Italian community. So, you know, melting pot, yes, melting pot, no.
I'm not saying that it was 100% successful because some communities did resist assimilation more than others.
Yeah.
And some communities embraced assimilation. Some communities did not, like specifically the ones you mentioned. However, it was always the expectation of people outside that community. The Italians retaining their identities and forming little Italies was never, ever celebrated. In that, let's say a city like Wichita, Kansas, suddenly has a little Italy. No one ever got together in, like, say, 1904, or maybe it wouldn't have been that time, but let's say like 1928 in Wichita, Kansas, and said, yeah, we've finally got a little Italy. This is so awesome. I mean, now we're finally on the same stage as great cities like Detroit and Chicago and New York.
I get that.
Nobody did. It happened, but it was never, ever considered a positive thing. Unlike, say, today, where it is, by the political elite, it is considered a positive thing. Having ethnic enclaves is seen as a symbol of cosmopolitanism and homage to the god of diversity.
Actually, it occurred to me as we were talking about this, a pop culture reference that I would use is Gangs of New York, which always kind of blew my mind because you had the locals, townies in New York, right? Basically the Americans, and they're up against the Irish as immigrants.
Right.
Which I always thought was just so bizarre because it was during the Civil War, I think. So we're talking late
the
late
Tammany
19th
Hall
century.
era.
Yeah, the Tammany Hall era.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you clowns are all fucking immigrants or sons of immigrants or
they were one
something, right? You know,
generation.
like at best, right? So again, that to me just emphasizes, you know, some stuff, some of which is about to come up. Okay, get into the West German infection, right? So I get
the air quotes infection.
So I get the fact that West Germany had not been in even before the Nazi Party, it hadn't been much about immigration.
Yeah,
it was more about acquisition, and then culling. You know, I could see that one of the things was, you can't resist immigration, right? You got to have an open door policy, right? Okay, I can see that bleeding into the rest of Europe. But aside from Scandinavia, the rest of Europe already had their post-colonial stuff going on anyways, right?
They didn't have mass immigration going. They were divesting themselves of empire, but they did not have mass immigration.
I believe the current demographics of France and Britain would argue with you, certainly by the 60s, 50s and 60s.
Oh, no, I thought we were talking like 40, the period of 45 to 49 during the formation.
Eventually,
of the
it got
BRD.
to that point, right? So whether or not it came through the FDR in the 40s, in the post-war era, by the time it got to the 60s, it was meaningless anyways because they had their post-colonial shit to deal with, except for the Scandinavians.
What do you mean
even the
when
Dutch,
you say it was meaningless? What is the it you're talking about?
the immigration policy question that you guys brought up as the infection, right? It would have happened anyways.
Like
because even
the belief that you are not allowed to question immigration.
The fact that you would have people there. If West Germany hadn't had that policy of open door and had immigration coming through it, Britain still would have had its post-colonial immigration. France, even the Dutch. The Dutch had theirs. Belgians had theirs. The only ones who are probably excluded from that are Scandinavia. Because they
didn't have overseas possessions.
They didn't have overseas possessions. Everyone else did, right? So
And
even
Italy.
the Spanish.
How many people?
Italy had Libya.
Italy, but Italy never faced them.
What's
that? Yeah, not very many. See, again, and this is kind of I see where you're going with this. Portugal didn't experience it. Italy did not experience it. They did not have massive waves of Africans coming into their countries in the 1960s and 70s.
I would argue that not necessarily for Portugal, but for
And neither did Spain. Mind you, yeah.
Well, you remember
Spain-
the last time a bunch of Africans showed up in Spain? It didn't go so well for like
Yeah.
800 years.
Yeah, but
I mean, the last actually the two times, right?
But yeah, Spain did not experience massive waves of immigration from at the end of its colonial period.
well, I didn't have. Well, yeah, I guess it did. Philippines.
It had a massive colonial
South America.
empire,
But I mean,
it
South
did
America-
not experienced massive immigration into Spain once it divested itself of its empire, or had its empire. Yeah,
I'd say, but
it
okay,
did
but
divest
the
itself.
Spanish Empire, with the exception of possibly the Philippines, different dynamic. But in South America, those all became independent nations.
Yes,
right.
yes.
So, but
But so did everybody else's.
So did everybody else.
however,
yeah.
okay, let me use examples here. Nigeria gained independence from Britain, right? Now there's a bunch of Africans who have the option to go somewhere else,
Right.
right? And there's a whole population of them,
Yeah.
right? And so they're tied to through the Commonwealth. Now they have the option of going there, right?
Right.
Same with India. Same with lots of countries. South American nations that gained their independence, they are now entities unto themselves with economies, colonial economies of themselves. They just become colonial possessions still, just not owned and run by Spain.
Who owned and ran them?
Well, Bolivia became Bolivia, Peru became Peru,
so
right?
like
Chile
you're saying
became
like,
Chile,
you're
Argentina
like,
became
you're saying
Argentina.
La Paz, the elites of La Paz colonized Bolivia at that point.
Yeah.
As compared to the elites of Madrid.
Right. So there wasn't that, and again, the Commonwealth is the Commonwealth, but so there's not this possibility or necessarily the desire to leave Peru to go to Spain, right?
You're right. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think this is where Steve was going. Do you think that maybe nobody wanted to leave Angola to go to Portugal because Portugal didn't have a very high standard of living?
No idea.
Maybe
I'd have to be able to speak to the demographics.
That nobody really wanted to leave Colombia to go to Spain.
because of Franco.
Because Spain wasn't really a nice place to live.
Spain probably wasn't letting them in.
They didn't try and get in illegally. Why not? They're trying to get in illegally now.
Yeah, because you're trying to get into a social
Because
democracy.
Spain is a much nicer place to live now than it was in 1961.
And back in, from 1945 on, or from 1939 onwards, it was a shitty place to try and squeeze into because it was A, racist, and B, they had fucking a Guardia Civil everywhere.
And Italy in 1961 was a place that people left. Mass emigration out from Italy, particularly in the south. Nobody trying to get in. So could it be that maybe the immigration that came into Europe in the post-colonial era was not an inevitability? Simply your ties to a former colonial possession does not mean automatic immigration. It was people leaving those countries looking for an improvement in their living conditions, and they chose your country because they already had a cultural understanding of who and what that host nation was.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, that's why you'll find that Hong Kong,
Right.
Hong Kong and India in particular have very strong ties, and the populations.
That's why they moved to England
Yeah.
and not Hungary.
Well, yeah, I mean that goes without saying.
So then immigration, post-imperial immigration, is not an inevitability.
I don't follow your logic there, and I'm going to choose not to argue with it. I'm going to keep going down my list.
No. One point at a time. How come people
never gonna get
emigrated
through
from Nigeria to England, but not from Angola to Portugal?
Because
Unless you concede that it is not an inevitability.
I'd say that the two comparisons makes one more of an inevitability, closer to an inevitability than the other.
What does that mean?
Britain was the stronger power, had the stronger empire. I'd say probably the English language in, say, Nigeria was more prevalent than Portuguese was in Angola or Mozambique. And therefore, there wouldn't have been that cultural knowledge of the language, and the economic development wouldn't have been as strong necessarily.
Okay, so let's change the examples to India and England and Brazil and Portugal.
Again, because it's South American, I think my gut instinct is to turn to the same Spanish model, which is, you know what, they had an administration there, a white European colonized administration, even after the independence. So it's not quite the same model, right? You've got arguably a better standard of living under that model than, say, one of the poorer African nations that didn't have a white colonial presence or made.
So you're still going to hold the line to say that a certain amount of immigration from your colonial possessions is going to be probable.
I'd say likely, and I'm actually going to turn the question around. It's not necessarily about them wanting to come somewhere, right? It might be even after these nations gained independence. Okay. Britain itself would have been going, okay, we need people to do X, we need people to do Y, right? We need people to do whatever, right? Within our community.
Define
we got jobs. Let's say
we.
We as a nation, as a white English nation.
So again, this goes back to my second point that the populations were not consulted. Can you tell me when this came up as like within Britain? When did this discussion take place? Was there a government that was elected sometime between 1945 and 1975 that ran exclusively on the banner of saying, we need to import people because we got jobs that you assholes aren't doing, and so we want to bring lots of people in?
Neither of us knows the answer.
I missed that.
Neither of us knows the answer to that question.
I know. I think I know the answer to that, and the answer is no one.
Let's say, I'm thinking that was probably a right. Like there would have been some association through the Commonwealth to say, okay, you can come to England, possibly. You probably have a few bureaucratic hoops to jump through. If they're going to go somewhere, it's probably going to be the UK because it's the America of the time. Right.
And they had we are talking the cultural affinity, the familiarization.
Right.
It was a known entity.
And let's say,
in the same reason why Indonesians went to Holland, Algerians went to France.
In 1946 to 1975, America was definitely much the America of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the preference.
No, post-war UK was not a happy place.
But
to
if
go.
but if you're in the West Indies, you can't get into America.
Yeah.
To the Commonwealth and former Commonwealth, it's easier to get. It's the equivalent of, okay, maybe I want to go to the U.S., but am I going to get a green card? Mm-hmm. I have probably, it's easier for me to get into some other country.
Being in the Commonwealth, it's easier to go to England, but
yeah, it was, yeah.
And the only thing,
but they would have gone to America in a heartbeat if they could have.
There was a possibility. I don't know. Maybe it became a trend in Britain, in the UK for now we're going to have au pairs. We're going to take Caribbean au pairs, or African au pairs, or serving staff, or whatever. I don't know.
Okay.
Like maybe there was a particular type of we were willing to import miners from Namibia, although that would have been German.
Yes,
whatever. Right. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Next point.
The conditions and consultation, but I think you subverted that a little bit by taking it back to the early days, like pre-1920s, because obviously there was a lot of immigration going on back then.
Yep.
Right, and so be it the Chinese workers who were here to build the railways.
Yep.
To the East European settlers who were brought in for the
settlement of building the agricultural economy.
Manitoba through Alberta, right?
Yep.
So And there was a lot of that going on. And there was no consultation then, but they were brought in. And funnily enough, it wasn't, because you put on, if anyone were to suggest an immigration, an anti-immigration these days, they'd be all racist, right? But the immigration back then was racist. It was like, okay, we're going to bring these people over and we're going to treat them like shit and we're going to give them nothing and then leave them on their own. That's their best case scenario. And they're going to do their thing, right? And, in addition to those points, I would add that the thing that's always been in play and remains in play, and it's what really bothers me about the whole concept. Like, so you're right. Immigration is to me a bit of a sacred cow, right? Because
I have always said it is the prime directive of the left.
It's not for the sake of it, right? But it's more for me. It's a reaction against anti-immigration because I'm like, I look at anyone who goes against it, and it's we don't need them. They take away our jobs. Have you looked at what they take away from us? You know what they do? They come here with doctorate degrees, and they end up cleaning your toilet. Do you want to clean your toilet? No, because you're hiring them to do it. So shut the fuck up and fuck off.
Do you think the majority of our immigrants are PhD candidates?
Not all of them, but some of them. I have
what percentage?
I have over the
Throw
course.
me a number.
Over the course, I can't give you
30%.
I can tell
Just
you.
ballpark it for me, buddy.
Anecdote.
25? 70?
Stop interrupting me.
I'm just asking you to finish your thought.
You're asking.
I'm just asking you to finish the thought. That's all.
You're asking me to answer, and as I go to answer it, you're fucking interrupting me.
All right.
And that starts getting
Okay.
annoying.
Okay.
All right. I don't have a statistic. I will tell you anecdotally through my experience.
Okay.
I have known and met 10 to 12 individuals who have had postgraduate or postgraduate degrees, who have been cleaning toilets, who have been driving cabs.
Like very menial jobs.
All right. So I'm emotional about that.
Okay.
All right. So there are examples out there. And when it comes to how do we vet our immigration policy, I feel it's like we don't, we're screaming for medical people here. We've got all these people with degrees from other places, but we don't take the time to upgrade them, to give them whatever training. And we've had that discussion too, because we know that's, we want to maintain the status quo within the medical community pre-existing, right? That's more important.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're moving from immigration to public sector unions now.
Yeah.
But
Agreed.
One of my bigger problems, anytime anyone with a surname ending in SKI in this province starts going on about immigration and being racist about it, I'm like, do you listen? Do you hear yourself? Do you know what your grandparents went through, your great-grandparents went through when they came to this nation, how they were treated by the Scots and the English, and how the Scots were treated by the English? It's like that fucking pyramid. Like, as long as you feel like you're somewhere, as long as you're not on the bottom and you've got someone to be below you, that's okay. Like, fuck off. And again, this is the angels of our worst natures. It just pisses me off. It's part of the human condition, and it pisses me off.
Did you mean the demons of our worst natures?
Well, I guess so.
I guess,
that's fair point.
The opposite of Pinker's position, the better angels of our nature.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you. I find all my points refuted by that one sentence from Steve. I will hang my head in shame now.
Oh, I'm just
no. It is a fair point. I should have done that. Metaphorically speaking, I should have.
I'm just looking for clarity in metaphors. That's all.
All right,
Anyhow,
next one.
I think I'll leave it at that.
Can I ask you a question on that last point?
Sure.
Would I be correct in saying that you are pro-choice in your orientation? Say in the abortion debate?
Oh, all right. We're going to have the pro-choice discussion.
Yeah, I'm just asking. I'm not going to delve into it. I just want to know if you are or aren't. Well, actually, no, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, actually. I'll withdraw that question.
No. Actually, I want to answer it.
Okay.
It. Well, speaking as a patriarchal white cis male.
Okay.
God damn it. It's a yes or no question.
Yeah, I know.
He
gets mad at me for interrupting him, but then I ask him something. It's like, oh my God.
Here's my opinion on abortion. Actually, it's
half an hour later.
It's to me, it's It's not black and white.
Okay.
If I had to choose,
Okay.
I will actually choose one. I'm more pro-choice than not.
So if it's how would you say, incomplete logic, poor thought, poor intellectual methodology, for someone who is an obvious descendant of immigrants to be anti-immigration, is it not the same poor intellectual methodology for anyone who was born to be pro-choice?
Interesting question.
If I cannot oppose immigration because I benefited, because I wouldn't be here without immigration, well then should I not oppose abortion because being carried to term is the only reason I'm here?
Okay, let me clarify.
Okay.
If you're going to be anti-immigration, then let's have a debate about it. Let's discuss it.
Okay.
As long as you're able to discuss it, that's fine. If you're going to be anti-immigration because you're an ignorant fucking racist, I got no time for you.
Okay.
Right? Because not only is it racist and ignorant to begin with, but you can't even put yourself in those same shoes because your whole family went through the same thing, right? That's my problem.
All right. What is the purpose of immigration? And I mean on a macro level, say across the Western world. Say, I want to ask, is there a common thread between Scandinavia, Western Europe, UK, North America?
Well, we're all white.
Okay, so is that a bad thing?
No, I think it's just. Well, I think it's.
I don't know. There's a PhD in there somewhere. Why was that the first thing that came to your mind?
Because fundamentally those were our starting points, right?
Yeah, but I said, why do we have immigration? And you said because we're all white.
You went to what do we all have in common?
Ah, okay. Sorry. I'm totally on the wrong track. That's what I mean. With immigration.
Yes.
Is there a unifying thread with all of these nations as to why they have immigration, or is it separate? Is there not a unifying thread? Let's put it that way.
I'd say there's a bit of both. I'd say there are common elements and there are unique elements. And
what are the common elements?
The common elements are, I think to a certain extent, nowadays in particular, it's okay. It's part of the give me your poor, your cold, your poor, your huddled masses, right? What
does that mean?
So you're less fortunate of the world. So if we've got refugees from Syria, let's all see who can take them in.
Altruism.
Right.
Okay.
So that's part of it, especially lately, right?
Okay.
But refugees are not immigrants, right?
Are they?
I suppose in practical terms they probably are. But
I kind of think of them as being.
Are we talking capital I or small I, right?
Because technically, aren't like refugees are supposed they seek safe harbor until
they are allowed in under a different set of rules.
But
they're still immigrating to another place. They're still leaving one place, coming to another.
Yeah, but
I said they're immigrants under a different name.
Yeah, I would agree. They're immigrants under a different set of rules.
Because my understanding of the rules for refugees is that, like, hey, once the situation stabilizes in your country, you're supposed to
only in certain countries. Canada, no.
I suppose. Okay.
Not only that. When I'm using the term refugee, again, turning the question around, am I using a capital R for the refugee or a small r? Right. In other words, what I'm saying is, if we're defining them as a refugee from conflict or strife or whatever, and they're coming to Canada, they might be coming in on an immigration visa. They just happen to be refugees from the country, not in an official capacity.
Right.
That I'm defining. It's just.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because there's a whole bunch of Ukrainians that came here in the last couple of years.
Yep.
Who were probably fully intending to go back to Ukraine.
What? I just saw a news thing on that. I don't know if it was Canada. It was maybe it was Ireland. It was in reference to, it was Ireland. It was in reference to these riots. Several 100,000 Ukrainians have come to Ireland as refugees, but they're making arrangements. They're all trying to get passport entry-exit paperwork squared away so they can go back to visit Ukraine over the Christmas holidays and then return to Ireland. And so then, this is part of the whole thing has been thrown wide open into debate. Are they really refugees?
Yeah.
I mean, especially if they do that, then they get 2 Christmases, and that's fucking bullshit.
Like if How can you call yourself a refugee if you're visiting this other country? Do you really need sanctuary? Do they really need sanctuary? But again,
They do.
That's a separate issue. I would say that yes, they are immigrants.
Okay.
Just they come in under a different set of rules.
Yeah.
Like we have family reunification immigrants.
Yeah.
Who are not in Canadian law, not considered immigrants. They're family reunification program. They're not immigrants. An immigrant in Canadian law is only someone who has gone through the point system. But that's something like 42% of the people who come into Canada.
Right.
So there you go. But at the end of the day, whether they're here on a student visa, whether they're here as an asylum seeker, whether they're here as an immigrant, whether they're here or like a point system, whether they're here for family reunification, I'm going to big tent approach, say they're all immigrants.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Look at that. We agreed on something.
Look at that. God damn.
But I mean, what other things? Well, there's a need, right? Like, so.
What need?
Well, again, for Canada in the late 19th century, it was we need people to build a railway for us.
Okay.
We need people to
Labor.
settle the prairie provinces and farm it.
So was that okay? So in the case of the railway, so would I be incorrect to say that there was a desire to suppress wages?
I'm trying to work through the negatives here. Would you be incorrect?
That the impetus
You
of
would-
that immigration was to suppress wages, so that if it were not for Chinese immigration to build the railway, they would have had to lure workers from Eastern Canada, from the population base in Eastern Canada, to come all the way out west to work at such distance and in such difficult conditions that they would have had to go to extreme cost to incentivize that work, which would primarily have to be done through wages. And so to avoid that, in other words, de facto suppress wages,
Yeah.
skew the supply-demand relationship within the labor market.
Yeah, probably. It's also possibly work that no one else wanted to do or could have done, or if you want to incentivize them,
Well,
had to pay them too much.
You pay enough and somebody will want to do it.
Because
Yeah.
that's all work, isn't it?
Right.
Like, I would not be doing my current work if it only paid me $20,000 a year. I enjoy my work, but I would not be doing it if it only paid me $20,000 a year.
I see they've upped the soldiers' pay
Drastically.
since I was last in.
Drastically. But that's
also,
the point.
like-
all work. When we say, like, when we talk about, oh, that's a job that Canadians don't want.
Yeah.
Why? Is it because they are just inherently opposed to it, or because it doesn't pay enough?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. But I mean,
Is that not
you know,
all of it?
we've got a lot of unemployed people in this country, and none of them are clamoring for the immigrants' jobs cleaning other people's toilets
Why is that?
because they don't want to clean.
What if they
anyone's
paid?
toilets.
Oh, so if those jobs paid $120,000 a year, you're saying they wouldn't do it?
They probably would.
So
You're right. It doesn't pay enough.
You're right. It doesn't pay enough.
So
It's unpleasant work and it's undignified work.
Yeah.
And the wages on offer simply do not compensate for those things.
I agree with you. And I'll extend the conversation about the Chinese laborers on the railroads up here. If not the actual workers, then certainly the precedent would have been set in the U.S. Because of their railway being built, which I think predated ours by
They did.
5 to 10 years.
Oh, well, it depends where. The railways in the American Southeast were...
I'm talking
We're
in the south. I'm talking in the West. 'Cause they had their own
but
transcontinental.
in the Southeast, they were also built largely by Chinese labor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in, say, the period from... they were all pretty much complete by 1824. So it was around that time.
Well, it's interesting.
And they were built almost very largely by... it's an interesting study in demographics because they also, in like the places we know of is in the American Southeast, imported huge amounts of Chinese labor. And this is in the antebellum period to build those railways simply because, well, to keep the labor costs low.
Yeah.
And then those communities, they stopped immigration when the railways were built. And within 30 years, those communities disappeared. They were completely assimilated, genetically assimilated into the American South. So completely that you'd never know they existed. But anyway, that's an aside. Can I just circle back to, like, you know, the traditional, the orthodoxy of, you know, jobs that host populations don't want. Are these jobs generally considered essential? Like you said, like cleaning toilets, empty garbage. We'll say janitorial, janitorial sanitation type jobs.
Yep.
And we'll say certain service jobs, right?
Yep.
Are they essential?
I'd argue that.
Do you know of a
by and
single
large,
business that can survive without janitorial services?
It depends on how you define survive, right?
Okay.
It's actually one of, for my purposes, when I rate a company, when I go into one of my leading indicators, one of my KPIs going into a company, is the condition of the washrooms.
Sure.
Right? Because I want to know what kind of unspoken contract there is between the employer and the employees. Right? Is it a nice clean bathroom? What's given by the employer, and how is it treated by the employees? Right? Does some literal asshole leave the toilet plugged up? Right? On the one hand, and on the other hand, has the employer left a plunger there for someone to unplug it? You know what I mean? Like, so it's, again, it depends on how you're defining how does a company survive, right? Because if you want to be a dickhead and you just want to provide an outhouse for people, even though
like,
you
say,
could provide them
porta-potty.
something else,
Yeah,
or
porta-potty,
even like a wooden shack with a hole in it, you know, you could do that.
Steve,
right?
Your thoughts. Are janitorial services largely mandatory?
No.
For a modern company?
They're de facto mandatory, but they don't have to be. Like,
So
I don't know. I don't know of a large company that I've worked at that doesn't have
didn't have
janitorial.
it. So
right,
No.
you could. Like, this is a thing that happens in Japan, right? Like,
Yep.
we all grew up in schools that had custodians.
Yes.
Japanese schools don't have custodians. The
students do it.
Do all the
Okay.
custodial work at the end of the day.
Well,
That's the
and
reason.
that's-
That's
right?
very interesting.
And if you think about it, like in the restaurant industry,
Yep.
right? It's the staff that does the majority of the custodial work,
yes.
right? Because they don't bring in like
That's true.
The chefs and the kitchen staff clean the kitchen,
And, like, you
the
mean, like,
wait staff
here.
clean
Here.
it down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess
So,
I'd
but
ask
it's
you
still
to
done.
clarify.
It's still done.
It's
The only
still done.
question is, like,
It's
who
only
is doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd
because
ask
I mean you don't hire a manager you're paying $140,000 a year to also sweep his office and empty his own garbage because he's got other.
however,
right.
Yeah. How do we, considering
Yeah,
how
how do we-
expensive every hour of his time
Exactly,
is,
so-
what do I want him doing with that time? Do I want him doing something that's unskilled that could be done by anybody? Or do I want him doing something that only he can do?
However, what kind of
That's a good
example does a CEO set if he's able to take the 5 minutes to sweep or mop or vacuum his floor every day? Right? If he can take those 5 minutes to do it,
Yeah, I mean,
that's an
if he's going
example
to do
for the
that,
rest
then
of
he's
the
going to
staff.
then he's going to make it as a okay, the last half hour of a day is custodial work, right? In the company.
But I'd ask
you can
you-
make that part of your corporate culture.
Yeah. Yes, you could. I guess you could. But again, is it?
But there's opportunity cost.
Yeah. There's opportunity cost.
Or even the smallest things. Like somehow, I can't remember if it was on basic or just in the regiment, but I just learned that if we just took a bit of paper towel, wiped down the sink and the faucet and the counter every time we used it,
Yeah, it made,
and everybody
it made
did
morning
that,
inspection so much easier.
Yeah.
you know, everybody does that.
Yeah.
You know,
Right?
I still do that today.
So do I.
When I'm at work, I'll go into the washroom, and of course, I'm one of the lower ranks in that building,
Yeah.
right? Or in my area, right? I'm one of the lower ranks, and so I'll come in. I'll share a washroom with majors, lieutenant colonels, and I'll come in, and someone will be washing their hands, or whatever. Say there's like 2 or 3 other people, and let's say they're all lieutenant colonels, and say person on my left is just finishing up as I get to the sink, and someone comes immediately after me, and there's someone who got there maybe a second before me. So the other guy washed up and he just leaves. I wash up. I immediately grab paper towel and start cleaning the sink. The one who just finished before me, who's toweling his hands, sees me do that. He'll pause. Then he'll grab some paper towel and he'll go clean up around his sink. Yeah. It's a powerful, a guilt response that if I'm not there to do it, they won't do it. But as soon as they see somebody else doing it, and also I think it's got something to do with the fact that I'm enlisted. Yeah. As soon as they see me doing it, then like, oh, I suppose that, like that impulse from phase training kicks in, right? Like, oh my God, I'm back. I'm back. I'm kicks in again.
I'm supposed to be a leader.
Yeah.
But and that's just it. The leadership point comes in, right? So first of all, at any level, if you're doing it, it helps plant the seed. So maybe that person does it once, or does it more often, if nothing else. Yeah. If you're doing it in the presence of your juniors, your supposed juniors, and they see you doing that, right? That's gold.
It should. Yeah, it should have a powerful effect.
But the question I was going to ask you actually is to clarify, when you say, are these things critical or not to the function of a company? Because what came out of the conversation that followed that was, okay, are you talking about hiring someone like an outside contractor to be a janitor?
That's how most companies do it.
Are you talking about?
It is generally cheaper. Yeah.
Are you talking about having someone on staff who's a dedicated janitor?
Either one.
Or are you talking about the staff doing it? Because
could be someone. It just so long as does it have to be done?
Yes, it does.
Do bathrooms have to be cleaned? I'm not asking who does it. I'm asking, do they have to be cleaned? Do garbages have to be emptied? Do floors have to be vacuumed?
Yes. I mean, yes.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. So then, because we don't want wage inflation taking place in these unskilled jobs that anybody can do, like there's no skills barrier to it, not even a language barrier, is not one of the purposes of immigration baked into the cake wage suppression?
Now you're talking my bread and butter.
Yep.
Right. So,
simple yes, no, buddy.
I'd say yes, it is. Okay. Right, and there's a reason for that. Okay. Right. So I'm going to start out with one statement and then flip it on its head. Right. Okay. The statement is, it is my experience that if I'm working from people from other parts of the world, basically immigrants, they are harder working. They'll show up more often. They'll never be late. They'll be diligent in what they do. So not just work hard, but work smart, right? They are more effective workers than anyone who was born in this country. Just point blank. That's, on average, right? That is my experience, right? And now I've seen that, and there's a lot of employers out there who know that, and they will pay those people a lower wage, and those people will be happy to do it, because they know what it's like to live without running water, without electricity, without, where the people around them are dying of disease. Right?
Like, they come in other words, they're easier to exploit?
You can only be exploited in this context. I mean, yes, they're exploitable in but then it's kind of like, okay, what do you think you're getting away with? Because this immigrant thinks they're getting away with the better deal. They're like, holy, look at this, woo! Right? I got 4 walls, I got 3 square, I'm good to go, right? And this guy's paying me 10 times what I've ever earned to do the same thing, right? Now, am I saying that's excusable? Am I saying I respect that employer for it? No,
of course not. No,
not at all.
You're just saying it exists.
It exists, right? The flip side of that same point is, I know that you can take anyone in any current organization and their current way of doing things. You could go from 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, paying them X. You could go to 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, pay them
Y,
1.25X, right? And still get better efficiencies. If you've got the right people and you train them and you manage your place well, right? That could be applied to almost any organization anywhere.
But it's still a cost saving. Like that's what
Right,
you're saying.
so-
That if you have better staff, better trained,
Yeah.
you still like there's a financial incentive to do that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like if it's me, yes, I agree that immigrants are brought here and they're paid pennies because they'll take it because they know life could be a lot worse.
That's what I mean. They're exploitable.
Right. But-
or at least more exploitable than the indigenous population.
But I need to clarify that I could take those same people, not worry about that wage inflation, and still come out the other end better, right? I could pay them not only a fair wage compared to the people who are here already, I could take them all, pay them more, work them less, and still come out the other end better.
Why don't they then?
Honestly, you really want to know the answers?
Yes.
I actually came to this epiphany in the last 2
want to know.
weeks.
I want to know your thoughts. Yeah.
I came to this epiphany the last couple of weeks because I've long been under the impression I've got some sort of karma that wherever I go to work at, I end up with psychotic companies who don't know what the fuck they're doing, right? And I came to the realization recently that it's not me. Every company is like that. Or at least the rule is most companies don't know what they're doing. And the exception are the ones who know they do. And I don't know if I've said this out loud. The most glaring, shocking statistic I've come across in my working life. I came across it about 5 years ago. Shook my head at it then. Forgot about it. Came back to it about a year ago. 90% of businesses fail.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably true. Yeah.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was absolutely shocked.
'Cause
And when
I've heard something similar
And
about
when I
that.
went back to it again, I thought, no, I must have forgotten that. I must have remembered that wrong. It must be 90%. Like some of them get bought out or something. No, it's 90% of them fail. 70% of them in the first 2 years.
Yeah, I believe that.
Right?
Or I've heard numbers similar to that.
Yeah.
So if you are a company that is operating right now,
Yeah.
the clock is already ticking.
Or
Right? If you
or
just
you're
start,
if you're
just
a startup,
started, you've just got a maximum of 2 years.
Yep.
If you've made it past 2 years, right?
you are already
You
walking
are-
over the bodies of 90%. Yeah, of your cohort. Yeah.
right? And and now you've still got a 2/3 chance of failing
Yeah.
just because you made those 2 years,
Yeah.
right? And so it all makes sense. And the more I work at a client and peel back the layers of what's going on and just ask the right questions, spot what's wrong with this picture,
Yeah.
then I I'll just look at the guy I'm talking to who's just, and I'm like, how the fuck are you supposed to do your job,
Yeah.
right?
Can I throw a dart?
Yeah.
I haven't really given this problem a lot of thought, but I've given it a tiny bit of thought. And my guess on it is that thought effort is a commodity.
Absolutely.
And so if I only have so much time, like time is a very finite and precious resource. So if I am a decision maker in an organization, my return on, like, you remember you talked about, like, say I could pay 1.25x
Yeah.
and I could get more productivity out of less time.
Yeah.
But that's going to take time to devise that scheme.
Nope.
And so they're not willing to devote the time to it because they're thinking of their time, they're devoting their thought resources to other problems. And they don't feel that their ROI on that, say, how can I improve the efficiency of my janitorial services? That just never crosses their mind.
No, it's not quite the same. What I would argue is, first of all, it's intangibles. That's the problem. The way you get to there, that, I'm convinced, my experience has convinced me, that the way you get to that 10% of companies that succeed is you need to not only be able to grow from small to medium and or medium to large. It's the medium is where medium is where the battle's won and lost. Yeah. It's you need to be able to manage well, which companies identify. Some of them struggle at it. Some of them are able to make a go of it, right? Yeah. But more than that, you need leadership. You need leadership principles, and we're talking ground up and back down. You need a feedback loop of individuals at all levels that create the teamwork that get you past the obstacles that procedures, policies all those management tools put in place, because those things will eventually paralyze you, because there's
Yeah,
not one
yeah.
that covers everything.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, so that's one of the things. And those are intangible concepts. You cannot convince people of what that is. Like, listen, if you stop yelling at your people, you're going to get better results. Okay, well, show me that on a spreadsheet. Well, no, I can't. All I can do is go out there, do the job for you, not yell at them the way that, like, you've been yelling at them, work with them to get better work out of them. And in 6 months, we'll be able to look at a spreadsheet and it'll look different. And I still won't be able to point you at the fact that difference, that positive difference on that spreadsheet, is going to look any different. It's going to be due to what I did and what you weren't doing, right? That's the fundamental problem with those companies out there. I had another point. I know I said I had two things, but I forgot what the other one was.
I was just asking.
How do we get there? It's because they don't want to have to think about those intangibles, right? They can't, right? They need something on a spreadsheet.
Could be. Right? Yeah, could well be.
So,
I also wonder if, like, just the number of people who are willing to, like, to be an entrepreneur, right? Maybe that's 20% of people.
Yeah.
But only 10% of the total population is probably willing to put in the work it takes.
Yes,
to
100%.
put in, right? Like, you look at
They're a rare breed.
you look at high performers in any field, right?
Yeah.
Any field, and they are the top 10th percentile of people, of humanity,
Yeah.
right? Like, do I want to work 80 hours a week or 90 hours or 120 hours a week?
Yeah.
To make this business work? No, I don't. I'm much happier working the 70 I do work as a truck driver.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or 40,
or the 44 that I can do as, say, like a plumber.
Yeah.
which
Working
is fine.
for Acme
Which is
Plumbing.
fine, because those are your
Right.
steady eddies in life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The thing is,
No, but it's just like the vast majority. So if a steady Eddie gets an idea, well, this is a great idea. It could make me millions, but okay, it could.
But I'm not willing to see it through.
But there's a lot, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
It's,
Like,
it's not just
Yeah.
it's not just willingness; it's ability and awareness
Yeah.
of ability.
So
right?
you have to have all these combinations, right? Like
Yeah.
all this combination of
Yeah.
all these things in all these attributes in this one person.
Yeah, you got to
And
have
those
the
people
idea, the character, the ambition, the
drive,
the
the-
drive,
Yeah.
the organizational aptitude. Yeah, it's
Right, like all these
a rare
characters,
combination.
it's a rare combination. So like 90% of businesses fail. Well, okay, there's
Yeah.
probably only 10% of the people who are capable of making that work.
Yeah.
Well, so
right,
and
yeah,
here's
good
the
point,
thing.
yeah.
And here's
Good
the thing
point.
I've also noticed, because when it comes to entrepreneurs, right, they're only going to make it from small to medium, and then things risk falling apart, because when they're small, they're the ones doing everything. It's all there in one noggin.
Yeah.
Right? They're doing all the logistics. They're doing all the purchasing. They're doing all the APAR. They're doing all the ops decisions, shipping, receiving, fucking forklift operator, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? They're doing all that stuff. When they move up the chain and they bring up a whole bunch of people to do those things as individual things, right? The entrepreneurs, like, these guys all suck. You suck at purchasing. You suck at ARAP. You suck at ops decisions. You suck as a forklift driver. Because all he sees is that each of these individuals can't do the thing that he wants them to do on its own as well as he did. But he had all those things in mind, all those things connected in his head. And not only that, he had the power to do so, and he had the motivation to do so, right? These people have none of those things. They have none of that interconnectedness to base their knowledge-based decisions on. They have none of the power to leverage anything, and they don't give a shit. And if you take that attitude towards them, they never will.
Yep.
Sorry, Steve.
I was just saying he's probably more upset that you're just not doing it the way he wants him to do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah. Can I ask you another question about the intent behind immigration? And I want.
We're back to that again.
Oh, yes, we are.
Well, can we shut this down soon? I'm getting tired.
Let me. Of course you are. I want to ask. This is my last question,
Okay.
and I want you to
For today.
keep. Yeah, on this topic. I want you to keep two snapshots in time in mind
Okay.
when you answer it, because the atmosphere is very different. 1899
Okay.
and 2021.
Sure.
Okay, no, let's not say 2021. Let's say 2023, because 2021 was COVID.
COVID.
Let's say 2023.
Yeah.
Is demographic change an intent behind immigration? demographic and cultural change. In other words, transforming the cultural milieu of the host nation. Is that an intent behind immigration? Not the intent, an intent.
So
like on the pro-immigration side, on the advocates of immigration.
I know what you're saying.
Is that a factor?
Because I thought you were talking about those who are setting policy.
Well, yes.
As opposed to those pro it. I mean, it's
like, say, if we were to look at the caucus of the Liberal Party in the Canadian context, the caucus of the Liberal Party,
yes,
or say we were to look at the caucus of the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom,
okay,
if we were to look at the caucus of the Labour Party in Australia,
okay,
if we were to look at the caucus of, I don't know if it's a caucus, maybe it is, of, say, the Democrat majority in the American Congress.
Okay, so are you talking about, in this case, so you're talking about policy setters, you're not talking about pro-immigration, as in just people who, like me, are pro-immigration? Because I can't speak for all of them.
Okay.
Right? So insofar as someone who kind of broadly espouses a pro-immigration policy, I can't speak for all of them, but I don't see that as being across the board a thing.
Okay.
However,
let me fine tune it for you a bit.
Okay.
Definitely those policymakers
Yeah.
in the political class and the people who are influential upon them. And I'll say academia and the journalistic class. And sorry, let me throw in the arts. Those three.
Okay. I see, this is where you and I have fundamental differences. Surprise, folks.
And I'm not asking you to make definitive statements. Give me your gut.
No, I don't believe. So first of all, I don't see direct influence by the arts, the media, and
arts, media, and academia. Or the academy.
Right. I see those more as social influences that appear out there and then influence, public relations reactions by the government. Right.
Oh, okay. So in other words, you're saying, just to clarify,
Yeah.
you're saying that those guys influence public opinion on the whole, at the macro level, which then influences government. Okay, fair enough.
And I don't, in that way and other ways, I don't agree with you necessarily the influence that those things have on the government, right?
Okay.
And in the same way, I don't see an intent to bring in a particular demographic.
No, see, I'm not asking, say, for like if there's a desire for a particular demographic that might exist,
or to influence demographics.
But I'm saying, like, is diversity for diversity's sake? Is that like diversity as a goal in and of itself? Is that an intent behind immigration?
Okay, so I was at first going to disagree with you, right? To say that changing demographics, in the way I was processing it, the way you originally asked it, I was like, no, I don't see that. That's just a bit too conspiracy theory, and how would you pull it off anyways?
Yeah.
Right? Because, if you look at the history of Canada, pre and post, pre-Confederation through now, it's all been a variation of, what were Canada's needs and what were the rest of the world's needs, and how do we match those up? So, okay, there's a bunch of Eastern Europeans, they're looking for somewhere to be, and we happen to need farmers. Come on in, right? When you put it in terms of, is multicultural diversity an aim? I can see that. I can see that in the same way that Trudeau announced, I've got a balanced cabinet because it's 2015, right? It's all that fucking nonsense for the sake of nonsense, for the appearance of nonsense bullshit. Yeah, I can see that, right?
Let's say we had
realistic.
The Republic of Green, and it's all populated by, like, it's an overwhelmingly monocultural, mono-ethnic green population. Is that seen as disadvantageous? Then it's like, we should bring people from the Republic of Purple, we should bring people from the Republic of Red, Pink, like we should have a more rainbow, like we're better off as a rainbow, as a pastiche, than a single color.
Well, again, I think that's not the question we need to be asking ourselves.
But
right?
is it a motivation? Is it one of the intents? Like, for example, if I said, okay, I want immigration, but I only want immigration from America, Australia, and the UK because they are culturally identical to us. Would you consider that, say, yeah, that's okay, that's acceptable? Or would you say, no, that's totally unacceptable?
I'd say it's silly. I'd say it's silly
Why?
to define any amount of definition, right? When we look at immigration, we should be looking at however many we need or feel like allowing, in what roles, whatever, like whatever makes sense, right? And whoever the fuck steps up to the plate to answer that call from wherever the world, it doesn't. And see, this is the whole point. This is where I'm colorblind really comes in.
Right.
Right. And frankly, I actually hate that concept because I'm not colorblind.
Right.
Right. I see color and I love them all.
But you
right?
kind of see, like, point of origin is kind of irrelevant to immigration and all.
Yeah.
But that's you as an individual. And I think you were saying that you kind of see that as at the low level, at the community level, when it's just general people, that kind of attitude prevails. But do you see that as prevailing at the policy level?
No, I can easily see. I'm speaking in hypothetical terms.
Yeah,
right now.
exactly.
I can't speak to
We
what's
don't
actually
know their
happening.
minds.
I can easily see
Yeah.
between the current government and the
Or like, say, the Albanese government in Australia.
and whatever bureaucracy is backstopping them, the mandarins who are running whatever department of the government. I can easily see them making some ham-handed. Well, yeah, we got all these. We got these goals we're going to set, but we're going to make sure 12.9% of them come from Oceania.
Yeah. And like 17.6 come from here, and 16.8 come from there, and
because and that's what
we want these places represented in our community.
And I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, what are we doing? Are we tracking the entire population of the world every year, and within each nation? How many of those people are actually, which subsect of that? Like, because how many whites actually live in China? Because we better keep getting close count of those, right? And once we figure that out, what the whole population is and how we've broken them down to all those groups, what are we aiming for? We're going to have exactly that proportionality within our nation every year.
Why do you think they do that?
So
why is diversity so important? Like, I hear this a lot. Diversity is our strength. But I've never heard it said why or how.
Well, because, and this is where skepticism comes in, right? My point isn't that, I do believe diversity is a strength. Right?
How?
Right? Well, just hold that thought. Right?
Okay.
But my point is, because it certainly hasn't hurt us. Right? Now, aiming for it artificially to be X, Y, or Z is stupid. It's ridiculous. Because how are we defining diversity? That's exactly where I was going with this, right? Unless we've defined all the subsects, like, okay, how many Jewish, black, homosexuals
in wheelchairs
are there globally? And do we have our representative proportionality of them here?
Just
in Canada.
Don't let them be left-handed.
Right, and wait for it. If the overall population of gay, Jewish, black people in wheelchairs diminishes worldwide, and we've got too many. What are we doing? We shooting them?
Yeah.
Like,
we start
buddy.
with the left. We start with the southpaws.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
Cat-handed bastards.
We got too many of you now. Right? We got a hole for you out back. Right? I mean, how stupid do we need to get this? Because how are we defining what diversity looks like? Okay. It has to be organic and generic, and that means to me, you just put it out there, and whoever shows up answers the call.
So how is diversity a strength for a society? What makes a diverse society like Holland stronger than a monocultural, non-diverse society like South Korea or Japan?
I personally, I just think any blend of exposures to anything, anything different is generally a good thing, right? And to use the genetic model, anytime anyone talks about being racially pure, I'm like, okay, did you see the royal families of the late 18th, the 19th century? I mean, you don't want to go there, dude, right? And by the same token, the most beautiful woman I've ever spoken to in my life was her father was English and her mother was East Indian, and she was just the most stunningly beautiful woman I've ever met. But she was just down to earth, sitting there in a bar talking to her, right?
Yep.
Same thing. Diversity is diversity is diversity. It's whatever random fusion of whatever elements, right?
Is there a way, do you think, we could measure, like, an analogy I really like was an argument I was listening to between two people talking about fighting in hockey. And the one person said, fighting is absolutely essential. You cannot take it out of the game without destroying the game. And the other guy was saying that no, fighting is completely peripheral to the game. And he said, if something is happening, you can observe it. And if you can observe it, you can measure it. And I've always really liked that. And I thought that's something that should be applied to policy and social science. So if diversity is a strength, if it's happening and we can observe it, how do we measure it?
And I think that to me, now you're really getting into trends mindset and trend psychology, right? Because trying to measure diversity?
How would we? Well, we can easily measure diversity.
No, because
we can measure its existence, but I'm talking about the benefit. How do we, first of all, can we observe the benefit to diversity?
Again, it's the intangibles. It's totally intangible. You cannot tangibly, because when you talk about a word like diversity, there are literally infinite combinations of what the word diversity could mean, right? There is absolutely no way to measure what diversity is. It's changing moment to moment. And what are the benefits of it?
Well, we can measure what it is, maybe not where it's at on each individual day.
You can't.
Well, then we can define diversity.
You know what diversity is? It's, you look at the nation of Canada, you look at the fact there's a whole bunch of different people with different colored skins, and some of them are gay, and some of them are
different religions, different backgrounds,
right?
Yeah.
And we're not all killing each other.
Okay.
We can treat, because fundamentally, and again, here's a cis white male, he's about to quote Martin Luther King Jr., folks. Hang on to your hats. Oh
Which
my God.
is not always done.
Cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Right? The most moving speech I've ever heard in my life is the speech of the I Have a Dream.
Okay.
And he has a dream. I have a dream that my children grow up to be judged on the basis of their character, not by the color of their skin. Right? Oh, actually, I got it backwards. Are judged not by the color of their skin,
but by the content of their
character. The content of their character, right? And that is all that it means. So diversity in that context is everything and nothing.
Well,
right?
To go back to this conversation about fighting, the one guy, he used the word intangibles. It's leadership, it's intangible, it's spirit, it's a variety of things that you can't just see right off the top. And then his opposite said, well, actually, we know who wins games, right? And so he whipped out on his phone some stats, and that's the nice thing about sports is they're insane about analytics. And he showed, okay, let's take a look at this year, where here are the number of teams that had the most fights in a given season, the most 5-minute fighting majors. All but 2 of them missed the playoffs. And so, okay, let's look at another year. Again, it was almost the same ratio. Out of all the teams that led the league in fights, the vast majority of them were losing teams that did not win games. And he said, well, okay, if fighting is an essential part, shouldn't it help you win? And so again, this is where I would look to diversity and say, okay, if diversity is a benefit, and we're not saying that it is like to go back to what you said, like here we are, we're diverse and we're not killing each other. Okay, is that a benefit? Is to say that, well, the good thing about diversity is we're not killing each other when we weren't killing each other before, but now we're diverse. So you're advocating a steady state, where when we say diversity is our strength, we are making the statement that we would be worse off if we were not diverse. Okay, and I'd like to know how do we measure that? How do we substantiate that?
We don't. And I'm going to tell you, that is my sense. I know that I'm a better person for having traveled the world and experienced the things that I have and being able to absorb very to me, very poignant observations about how people are in the rest of the world, right?
Okay.
And there are a lot of them, right?
Okay.
Having seen poverty, having seen how people drive
Yeah,
in Saudi
okay.
Arabia and Spain and Italy, right? But at the same time, one of those interesting things about diversity is I've gone to all these places and I've learned fundamentally, you know what? Human beings are fucking human beings.
Okay.
They get along just fine. They treat each other well. Like as individuals, as you know, me, whenever I get off the beaten path as a tourist, I don't like to be a gringo. I like to go and
Try and blend.
Just do what the locals do, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm lucky, I get the chance to do that and shop where they shop and stuff like that.
Despite the cautionary tale of our own prime minister,
And people are people.
his trip to India.
I'm not talking about that bullshit.
Mr.
I'm not
Dress Up.
I'm not talking dress and mufti. I'm just so you know that's what I'm talking about too, and that's where the whole Martin Luther King comes in because I'm the content of the character, right? Because that's what I'm saying. People are people everywhere. There's shitty ones. There's good ones. There's this baseline of normal that nobody in the history of anybody has ever been on, and that applies to everyone on the planet, right? So
you think everyone has the same baseline?
yeah, and none of us are on it. Not a single one of us has ever been on. We are all eccentric in our own ways, right?
Like I've had the same observation.
Yeah.
Where I've been fortunate enough to travel a little bit and to see different cultures and be exposed to different things. And I felt I benefited from it too. So does that give us the right to impose that on everyone else here without their consent?
Oh, impose. It's always imposition. No.
Does it?
No.
But isn't that what we're doing when we enforce immigration upon them?
So here's...
Say, like, you're going to be diverse because, trust us, we think it's good for you.
So...
Can we say that? Is that not what we're doing?
Here's the most important reason you and I are talking.
Okay.
And once in a while, let Steve say something. Is because... because I've started to realize this, right? Because you raise some very interesting points. You're very forceful with them, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, I'm just going to start going,
Shut up.
You know what? Fuck you, because you're trying to impose your anti-immigration on me, right? Fuck you. You can't do that, right? You accuse me of imposing diversity on you, or you're trying to impose anti-diversity on me. So fuck you.
I'm just asking you a question.
No, but that's
that you don't want to answer.
No, but that's the whole point, right? I find increasingly, and I've been thinking about this before coming in today and over the course of the podcast, is that, you keep saying things like, is diversity good or bad for us?
Right.
Right? Is immigration good or bad for us? We're starting to think about these things. And I'm saying, when it comes to the immigration, it's like, I had the pushback against you, well-versed, and I can't remember what it is now. Shit. It's just...
Was it... Okay, I'm going to throw a dart. Let me know if this inspires anything.
Yeah.
We can say that, of course, nothing is an absolute good. It all depends on how you do it.
I think that's part of it. It's like just because there are reasons to be anti-immigration doesn't mean you have to be anti-immigration, right? It's just let's just, like I said, let's talk it through. Let's talk about the real issues, right? I don't see immigration as the issue. Let's find out what the issues are.
What?
Right? So if you've got issues with immigration, I'm going to say to Patty.
Yeah, you got it.
What's your last name again?
That guy. Baldy.
I'm going to say to you, okay,
in this room.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you that immigration is the problem, but I don't think we are incapable of a solution. I'd like to know what problems you have with immigration, and I'm betting, especially the two of us, with Steve's help, every once in a while, we'll come to a solution that's agreeable to both of us, right?
Probably. I think so. Yeah, probably.
So that's solid. Same with diversity, right? Diversity, like I said, trying to define diversity is like trying to hold water in your fingers.
Really?
You can't do it.
I don't think so. I think diversity is very
definable. No. What does diversity look like right now? Oh, it's changed. Oh, Look, a gay guy just walked out the door, and a Jewish guy just walked in.
Way at all.
Right?
I feel diversity is very easy concept to understand and define.
It's completely fluid because there's no way. Because diversity could mean anything at any given moment.
Weather could mean anything at any given moment, but it's easy to define what weather is. Like we have an inherent understanding of what weather
Only
is.
what it is at the moment. So is weather good or bad? Come on, you gotta tell me. Good or bad?
It's good.
All right then.
Weather is good.
Even if it's lightning striking your car as you drive down the highway and you flip over on your head on the sleet and slam into an ice wall.
Yes, that would suck. That would be a festival of unpleasantness. But weather is good because if we didn't have weather, I would assume we had no atmosphere. And I think that would be a really bad situation.
Is that causation or correlation?
I'm going to say causation. But say for diversity, I would say that, like diversity is difference. Mm-hmm. Difference in division. Mm-hmm. So I can understand, I think a certain amount of diversity absolutely is necessary. And like this kind of goes back to like why it's like say throwing a dart to you to say that no one thing is an absolute good. Such as say immigration or say regulation or income redistribution. None of those things is an absolute unconditioned good. It all depends on how are they executed.
Absolutely.
Right? How are they done?
How are they negotiated?
Yeah. Who decides what should be done when there are times of disagreement?
Yeah. And how long does it take that committee to do its job?
Right. And so that then leads me to say, okay, that was my phone. With our current approach to immigration, is our current immigration policy and is our current our current policy of multiculturalism, which can be summed up as diversity as our strength, is it working for us? And should we change the way we do our cultural identity? Or the way we encourage cultural identity? Should we change our model of immigration?
I think those are all valid questions. And again, stay tuned for next episode, folks, because we just had the opening question to it, right? I think because we need to start defining those things, starting with that last question, right? And then go from there. What does good look like?
Yeah.
And then we have to start refining from there.
Right.
Right. I don't think of immigration as, I look at it as more good than bad. I don't look at it as a sacred cow for its own sake. I just look at it as a thing that exists. Mm-hmm. It seems perfectly natural to me. Right. Right. It's like saying, arguing, Trent, why do you want the sky to be blue? I didn't realize I had a choice. Right?
I didn't realize I had a choice.
Immigration is just a thing.
Right.
Right. How we choose now, how blue we want the sky to be. Maybe we can talk about that.
Right. All righty.
Okay.
Is that for today?
I think so. We've belabored all the points.
Oh, we've gone all over some
Time
interesting
has
places.
flown.
Holy shit.
Yes.
I'm impressed with where we got to.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here from Israel.
Well, we did change after the
because
break.
it was, I made the assertion that one of the ripple effects of the Israel-Gaza conflict is that the West is now questioning immigration.
You're right. Okay.
When in the past, that I don't think it would have happened had October 7th not taken place.
No, absolutely.
Good point.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Please like, share, subscribe, share us around so we get more than the half dozen listeners we got.
No,
Last
we're
time.
fine. We're fine with 6. In fact, we should pare this down to like 2.
No,
Yeah.
spread the...
No.
I like to think this is a good one. Better one than last week.
That's clearing a low bar, my
Yes,
friend.
it is. It is, apparently, because there's only one lower than that.
Yeah. All right. Questions, comments, concerns to complicatedpod@gmail.com. And thanks.
All right.
Ciao.